Welcome. I'm Magnus, and I bring you horror stories to help you relax, or maybe to keep you up at night. Tell us where you're from. Are there spooky forests nearby? If you're a fan of scary stories, subscribe and drop a like. Get cozy, and let's begin. My name is Elliot Mercer, 32 years old, and I've spent most of my life in Richmond where I work as an environmental consultant. The daily grind of office life had been suffocating me for months, and I desperately needed to disconnect. That's when I remembered reading about abandoned fire lookout towers scattered throughout Virginia's mountains. These forgotten sentinels, once vital for spotting wildfires, now stood as skeletal remnants of another era. The Bald Knob Fire Tower in the George Washington National Forest particularly caught my attention. Remote, supposedly abandoned for decades, and surrounded by dense wilderness. My colleagues thought I was crazy when I mentioned my weekend plans. "You're going alone?" Tanya had asked with that concerned wrinkle between her eyebrows. "Those towers are off limits for a reason, Elle." But I brushed off their warnings with practiced nonchalance. I'd been planning solo adventures my whole life, and nothing bad had happened yet. Besides, the allure of spending a night above the treetops, surrounded by nothing but mountain wilderness, was too tantalizing to resist. I packed light, just my hiking gear, a sleeping bag, enough food for 3 days, and my grandfather's old hunting knife. The drive from Richmond took nearly 4 hours, winding through increasingly remote roads until pavement gave way to gravel, and finally to little more than dirt trails. My Jeep handled the terrain well, though the final 5 miles tested even its capabilities as I navigated around fallen branches and through mud pits that had formed from recent rains. The forest was unnervingly quiet when I finally parked at the trailhead. No birdsong, no rustling in the underbrush, just the occasional whisper of wind through pine needles. I shouldered my pack and consulted the paper map I'd printed, since cell service had disappeared an hour back. The tower was supposedly a 3-mile hike up steep terrain, and with dusk approaching, I needed to move quickly. The trail was barely visible, overgrown with thorny bushes that snagged at my clothes. Twice I lost the path entirely and had to backtrack. The forest grew denser as I ascended, the trees pressing closer like disapproving spectators. Something about the woods felt wrong, like they were holding their breath, waiting. I'd hiked plenty of remote trails before, but never had I felt so distinctly unwelcome. As I climbed higher, I noticed odd markings on several trees, deep gouges in the bark, too high and too powerful to be from any typical forest animal. At one point, I came across a clearing where it looked like something massive had bedded down, flattening the vegetation in a circular pattern nearly 8 feet across. My heart quickened as I remembered the local legends about these mountains. The Sasquatch stories weren't just campfire tales here. Many locals spoke of the creature with the certainty of discussing a reclusive neighbor. The sun was setting when I finally caught sight of the tower, its metal frame silhouetted against the darkening sky. Standing nearly 100 feet tall, it looked more ominous than I'd expected, a spindly giant with a small cabin perched at its summit. The lower steps had been removed to prevent casual climbers, but I'd come prepared with a collapsible ladder I'd strapped to my pack. Setting it up against the lowest platform, I tested its stability before beginning my ascent. With each step up the rusted metal staircase, the stairs groaned and swayed slightly. Wind whistled through the structure, creating an eerie, almost musical sound. By the time I reached the cabin at the top, darkness had nearly fallen. The wooden door hung partially off its hinges, and inside, the small room was dusty but surprisingly intact. A simple cot frame remained bolted to one wall, and the panoramic windows, though grimy, offered breathtaking views of the surrounding wilderness stretching for miles in every direction. Something about being so high above the forest floor made me feel both powerful and terrifyingly vulnerable. As I set up my sleeping area and prepared a cold dinner, I couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. The forest below had transformed into a sea of darkness, with only the occasional glint of moonlight on leaves to break the perfect blackness. And somewhere in that darkness, something moved, something large enough to make the tops of trees sway in its wake. Dawn broke with a heavy fog that wrapped around the tower like ghostly fingers. I'd slept fitfully, waking at every creak of metal and whisper of wind. The strange noises I'd heard during the night, low, rumbling grunts, and the unmistakable sound of something large moving through the underbrush had left me on edge. Still, in the pale morning light, I tried to rationalize my fears. Probably just a bear or a deer. Nothing to worry about. After a quick breakfast of instant oatmeal, I decided to explore the area around the tower. The fog was starting to lift, revealing a magnificent view of rolling mountains stretching to the horizon. I climbed down the metal stairs, each step echoing through the structure. The ground around the base of the tower told a disturbing story. Large, humanoid footprints circled the perimeter, some measuring nearly 18 inches in length. Too big for a human, too shaped for a bear. My mouth went dry as I knelt to examine them more closely. The tracks led toward a small stream about a quarter-mile from the tower. Curiosity overrode my growing sense of danger as I followed them, noting how deeply they pressed into the soil. Whatever made them was heavy, much heavier than a person. Along the way, I noticed other strange signs. Broken branches high up on trees, clumps of what looked like coarse, dark hair caught on thorny bushes, and most disturbing of all, smears of what appeared to be dried blood on several rocks. At the stream, the tracks disappeared, but something else caught my attention. A crude shelter formed by fallen logs and branches leaning against a rock outcropping. It was big enough to accommodate something much larger than a human. My pulse quickened as I approached cautiously, hand instinctively reaching for my grandfather's knife. The shelter smelled of wet fur and something metallic, blood. Inside, I found more clumps of hair and what looked like crude bandages made from torn clothing, stained dark with blood. Common sense screamed at me to head back to my jeep and leave this place behind. Instead, I decided to return to the tower and gather more supplies for a proper exploration. The mystery of what lived in these woods had hooked me completely. If there was even a chance that I could document evidence of something unknown to science, perhaps the legendary Bigfoot, it would be worth the risk. I'd come back with my camera and spend the day tracking whatever had made those footprints. Halfway back to the tower, I froze. Something moved in the dense underbrush ahead, something massive. The vegetation parted, and for just a moment, I caught a glimpse of a hulking figure disappearing behind a thick stand of pines. It moved with surprising grace for its size, but what struck me most was the matted condition of its dark fur, with what appeared to be open wounds visible even from a distance. My legs shook as I stood rooted to the spot, unable to move until long after the creature had vanished. Back at the tower, I paced the small cabin, debating what to do. The rational part of my brain insisted I leave immediately, but a stronger impulse, driven by curiosity and perhaps a touch of arrogance, pushed me to stay. I'd come here seeking adventure, hadn't I? Something extraordinary was happening in these woods, and I was possibly the first person to witness it in decades. How could I walk away now? I decided to fortify my position in the tower, creating makeshift barriers for the windows and door using the few pieces of broken furniture I found. As afternoon faded into evening, the forest grew restless. Birds suddenly took flight in massive, panicked flocks. The wind picked up, carrying with it a low, mournful sound that might have been the breeze through trees, or might have been something else entirely. From my vantage point, I scanned the forest with my binoculars, searching for any sign of movement. That's when I spotted it. A dark figure standing perfectly still at the edge of a clearing about half a mile away, partially obscured by foliage but unmistakably watching the tower. Night fell quickly, bringing with it an oppressive darkness punctuated only by my small lantern. The sounds grew closer. Heavy footsteps circling the base of the tower, the metallic groan as something began to climb the stairs. My breath caught in my throat as I huddled in the corner, clutching my knife. The footsteps stopped just outside the cabin door. Then came a different sound, a labored breathing, and what almost seemed like a whimper of pain. Whatever was out there, it was hurt, and it knew I was here. The door to the cabin shuddered under the weight of something massive leaning against it. My barricade, a collection of broken chair legs and an old metal desk, wouldn't hold if the creature decided to force its way in. Heart hammering in my chest, I backed into the farthest corner, knife gripped so tightly my knuckles turned white. The breathing outside grew more labored, punctuated by low grunts that sounded disturbingly human. Gathering what little courage I had left, I called out, "I'm not going to hurt you." My voice cracked with fear, betraying my false bravado. The response was immediate. A startled movement that shook the entire structure, followed by a sound that chilled me to the bone. Something between a moan and a word. Then silence, heavy and absolute, before the unmistakable sound of the creature descending the metal stairs. Morning couldn't come fast enough. I spent the night wide awake, jumping at every sound, convinced that at any moment the door would burst open and I'd come face to face with whatever roamed these mountains. When dawn finally broke, I peered cautiously through a gap in the boards covering the window. What I saw made my blood freeze. The creature stood in a clearing about 50 yards from the base of the tower, fully visible in the pale morning light. It was enormous, at least 8 feet tall, with a massive, barrel-shaped chest and powerful limbs covered in dark, matted fur. But what struck me most was its condition. The creature's body was a map of suffering. Deep gashes across its chest oozed dark blood. What looked like bullet wounds peppered its left shoulder, and a particularly disturbing injury had left part of its right arm hanging awkwardly, possibly broken. Its face, surprisingly expressive with deep-set eyes under a prominent brow, registered what I could only describe as wariness and pain. For several minutes, we simply stared at each other, me from my perch in the tower, it from the edge of the trees. Then, with surprising gentleness for something so massive, it placed something on the ground before retreating back into the forest. Curiosity overrode my fear. I waited until I was certain it had gone, then carefully descended the tower to investigate. There, in the dirt, lay a crude poultice of chewed herbs and leaves, the same material I'd seen in the makeshift bandages at the shelter. Was it offering me something? Warning me? Marking its territory? I returned to the tower, more confused than ever. The creature, this Sasquatch, Bigfoot, whatever name fit the being I'd encountered, seemed to be trying to communicate rather than attack. Its injuries suggested a violent encounter with humans, perhaps hunters or poachers. No wonder it was wary. Yet it had approached me, revealed itself to me. What did it want? As these questions swirled in my mind, a new sound cut through the morning quiet. Voices. Human voices, approaching from the trail I'd used to reach the tower. 3 men emerged from the tree line, each carrying rifles and wearing camouflage clothing. They moved with purpose, scanning the ground for tracks, clearly tracking something. With a sickening realization, I understood that they were hunting the creature. These weren't wildlife officials or researchers. The furtive way they moved, the lack of any identifying markers on their clothing, suggested something far more sinister. I ducked down, not wanting them to spot me in the tower. Their voices carried clearly in the still morning air. "It can't have gone far, not with those wounds," one said, kneeling to examine the ground. "Johnson swears he hit it at least twice yesterday." Another spat on the ground. "Thing's worth a fortune if we can bring it in, dead or alive. Preferably alive, but I ain't taking chances with something that size." Disgust and anger surged through me. These men had shot the creature, were hunting it like an animal, or worse, planning to capture it for profit. I remembered its injuries, the pain evident in its eyes. Without fully thinking through the consequences, I made a decision. I needed to warn the creature somehow, help it escape these hunters. But how? I was trapped in the tower, and revealing myself to the men below might put me in danger as well. As if sensing my dilemma, a distant crash echoed from deep in the forest, something large moving rapidly through the underbrush. The hunters immediately tensed, raising their rifles. "Over there," one shouted, and they took off in the direction of the sound. I waited until they were out of sight before scrambling down the tower. This was my chance to find the creature first, to somehow communicate that it needed to flee. I followed the tracks leading away from the clearing, moving as quickly and quietly as I could through the dense forest. The trail of broken branches and disturbed earth was easy to follow. The creature wasn't trying to hide its passage. After about a mile, I found myself in a small gully where a spring bubbled up from between rocks. And there it was, crouched by the water, attempting to clean one of its wounds. It looked up sharply as I approached, rising to its full, intimidating height with a rumbling growl that vibrated in my chest. We stood frozen, regarding each other with mutual fear and fascination. Slowly, trying not to make any sudden movements, I raised my hands to show I was unarmed. "They're coming," I said softly, gesturing back the way I'd come. "Men with guns. They're hunting you." I wasn't sure if it could understand my words, but something in its eyes, a flicker of comprehension, perhaps, made me think it grasped at least the essence of my warning. The creature's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. A flash of what I could only describe as terror crossed its strangely expressive face. It glanced toward the direction I'd indicated, then back at me, seemingly torn between fleeing and maintaining its defensive posture. Making a split-second decision that would forever alter the course of my life, I slowly reached into my pocket and pulled out the trail map I'd been using. "Look," I said, unfolding the paper and pointing to a series of ridges to the north. "Here, no roads, no trails, just wilderness for miles." Again, I wasn't sure how much it understood, but the creature studied the map with unmistakable intelligence in its deep-set eyes. It reached out, slowly, cautiously, with massive fingers that could have crushed my skull effortlessly, and touched the paper. The gentleness of that touch was perhaps the most shocking thing I'd experienced yet. A distant shout broke the moment. The hunters were getting closer. The creature looked up sharply, then back at me. What happened next defies easy explanation. It reached out again, this time grasping my wrist. Not roughly, but with unmistakable urgency. Then it turned and began moving rapidly through the forest, still holding on to me, clearly indicating I should follow. My feet moved before my brain could process the absurdity of the situation. I was being led deeper into the wilderness by a wounded Bigfoot, away from the safety of my tower and vehicle, toward God knows what. We moved at an astonishing pace, the creature navigating the difficult terrain with practiced ease despite its injuries. It knew exactly where to place each foot, how to slide between tightly packed trees, when to duck under low-hanging branches. For my part, I stumbled along behind it, my wrist still firmly in its grip, my lungs burning with the effort to keep up. After what seemed like an eternity, but was probably only 15 or 20 minutes, we reached a sheer rock face rising at least 60 feet. The creature finally released me and began climbing with surprising agility, using handholds invisible to my untrained eye. "I can't follow you up there," I called, panic rising in my voice. The hunter's shouts were growing closer, and I was now stranded far from any trail or landmark I recognized. The creature paused in its climb, looking down at me with what I swear was frustration. Then it descended, moving to a different section of the cliff face. It brushed aside some vegetation, revealing a narrow opening, a cave entrance, hidden by overgrown bushes and fallen rocks. It gestured emphatically for me to enter. Every instinct screamed that following a wild creature into a dark cave was suicide, but the alternative, facing three armed men who had already demonstrated their willingness to shoot first and ask questions never, seemed worse. Taking a deep breath, I ducked into the opening, the creature following close behind. Inside, the passageway widened enough for us both to stand, though the creature had to hunch slightly. Darkness enveloped us as we moved deeper, the sound of dripping water echoing off stone walls. Just as my panic threatened to overwhelm me, the passage opened into a larger chamber dimly lit by a small opening in the ceiling far above. What I saw there stopped me in my tracks. The cave was clearly a long-term shelter, crude sleeping areas made from gathered pine boughs, stores of what appeared to be edible plants and berries, even primitive tools crafted from stone and wood. Most surprising of all was a collection of human-made objects, tattered clothing, a broken flashlight, metal containers, even a few books, all arranged with obvious care along a natural stone shelf. The creature moved to one corner where a crude pallet of leaves and moss formed a bed. It sank down heavily, its breathing labored, fresh blood seeping from several of its wounds. The bullet holes in its shoulder looked angry and infected. Without medical attention, it would likely die, a fact it seemed to understand all too well. It gestured to its injuries, then to my backpack, its meaning clear, "Help me." Outside, the voices of the hunters had grown distant. They'd lost our trail. But they wouldn't give up easily, not when their prize was so valuable. I was trapped in this cave with an injured, potentially dangerous creature that was essentially asking me to play doctor. The absurdity of my situation hit me all at once, and I nearly laughed despite the gravity of our predicament. "I'm an environmental consultant," I told it, as if that explained everything. "Not a doctor. I don't know how to treat gunshot wounds." The creature made a sound, a soft huffing that might have been frustration or pain. Then it reached for one of the books on the stone shelf. To my utter astonishment, it flipped through the pages with purpose before showing me a specific section. It was a tattered field guide to medicinal plants of the Appalachian region, open to a page about treating infections and wounds. The implications were staggering. This being could read, could understand complex concepts, could plan ahead. It wasn't just some animal, it was something else entirely. With trembling hands, I emptied my pack. I had a basic first aid kit, antiseptic wipes, bandages, pain relievers, but nothing adequate for treating bullet wounds. The creature seemed to understand this. It gestured toward the cave entrance, then mimicked picking plants. It wanted me to gather specific medicinal herbs, the same ones it had used to create the poultice I'd found earlier. "You want me to go out there?" I asked incredulously. "With those hunters still around?" As if in answer, a distant gunshot echoed through the forest, followed by the sound of men crashing through underbrush. They were circling back. The creature and I locked eyes, a moment of perfect mutual understanding passing between us. Neither of us could leave this cave without risking death. We were trapped together, a wounded mythical being and a city dweller who'd foolishly sought adventure in the wrong corner of Virginia's wilderness. As darkness began to fall outside, transforming our cave into a pit of shadows, I made a small fire using branches from the creature's woodpile and my emergency matches. By its flickering light, I did what little I could with my limited supplies to clean the creature's wounds, all while straining to hear any sounds of approach from outside. Dawn broke with an unnatural stillness. No birdsong, no rustling of leaves, just the labored breathing of the creature beside me. It had slept fitfully through the night, occasionally whimpering in pain despite the ibuprofen I'd crushed into water and somehow convinced it to drink. I'd done my best with the wounds, cleaning them with antiseptic wipes and applying makeshift bandages torn from my spare shirt, but infection had clearly set in. Its temperature was dangerously high. I could feel the heat radiating from its massive body, even without touching it. "I need to get help," I whispered, more to myself than to the creature. Its eyes fluttered open at the sound of my voice. Intelligent eyes that regarded me with what looked disturbingly like resignation. It knew it was dying. It reached out again, this time toward a small leather pouch near its sleeping area. With trembling hands, I brought it closer. Inside were small carved wooden figures, crude but recognizable representations of animals, trees, and what appeared to be human figures. Art. This dying being created art. The realization broke something in me. I couldn't let it die. Not like this. Not hunted down like an animal when it clearly possessed intelligence, creativity, perhaps even a culture of its own. "I'm going for help," I said firmly, gathering my pack. The creature made a soft sound, reaching for my arm with surprising strength despite its weakened state. It shook its head slowly. No, it didn't want me to go. I gently removed its hand. "I have to try," I insisted. "You'll die otherwise." Moving to the cave entrance, I peered cautiously outside. No sign of the hunters, but that didn't mean they weren't nearby. Dawn had just broken. Visibility was still poor. My plan, such as it was, involved making my way back to the fire tower where I'd left my satellite phone in my rush to warn the creature. From there, I could call for help, though exactly what kind of help and what I'd tell them remained troublingly vague in my mind. The journey back seemed to take forever. Every shadow held potential danger. Every snapping twigged the possibility of armed men. Twice I had to duck behind trees as voices approached, hunters still searching the area with grim determination. When I finally reached the clearing around the tower, I nearly cried with relief, until I saw 3 unfamiliar vehicles parked beside my Jeep. They'd found my camp. Moving with exaggerated caution, I circled the clearing, trying to assess the situation. From what I could tell, 2 men remained near the vehicles while the third had climbed the tower, probably searching my belongings for clues. My satellite phone would be useless to me now. I needed a new plan, fast. The creature was dying, and I couldn't reach help without risking capture by the hunters. Then I remembered, my Jeep keys were still in my pocket. If I could somehow create a diversion, I might be able to reach my vehicle and escape. The diversion came in the form of nature itself. A sudden movement at the forest edge caught everyone's attention. A large deer bursting from the underbrush, startled by something unseen. In the moment of distraction, I sprinted for my Jeep, keys already in hand. I'd almost reached it when a shout went up. "Hey, stop right there." The distinctive click of a rifle being cocked froze me in place, mere feet from my vehicle. "Turn around slowly," came the command. I complied, finding myself facing a bearded man in his 50s, rifle aimed squarely at my chest. "You the one staying in that tower?" he demanded. I nodded mutely. "Seen anything unusual around here? Something big moving in the woods?" The question confirmed my suspicions. These weren't official game wardens or park rangers. These were the same men hunting the creature. Just deer and the occasional bear. I lied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm just a hiker. Was planning to head back to Richmond today." The man studied me skeptically, his eyes taking in my dirty clothes and the scratches on my arms from pushing through dense underbrush. "That right? Then you won't mind if we take a look through your gear before you go. Make sure you ain't hiding nothing interesting." Before I could respond, a terrible sound echoed through the forest, a long, mournful howl that seemed to contain all the pain and sorrow in the world. It raised the hair on my arms and sent ice through my veins. The creature, it was calling out, perhaps in its final moments. The effect on the hunters was electric. All three immediately snapped to attention, the one threatening me momentarily distracted. "That's it," he shouted to his companions. "Northeast, maybe half a mile." It was now or never. With the man's attention divided, I lunged for my Jeep, yanking open the door and throwing myself inside. The key entered the ignition on pure muscle memory as a bullet shattered my rear window. The engine roared to life, and I slammed the accelerator, tires spitting dirt as I careened down the access road. More shots rang out behind me, but I kept going, branches whipping against the sides of my vehicle as I pushed it to its limits on the rough terrain. I should have kept driving. Should have headed straight for the nearest town, reported the armed men to authorities, saved myself. Instead, I found myself turning off the main forest road onto an even rougher track that would take me north, toward where the creature's call had originated. I couldn't abandon it, not after it had shown me trust, not after I'd promised help. My Jeep could get me closer than on foot, give me a chance to reach it before the hunters did. The track ended abruptly at a fallen tree. From here, I'd have to continue on foot. Grabbing my emergency kit from the glove compartment, including a flare gun intended for signaling rescuers, I set off at a run through the forest. The creature's calls had stopped, which either meant it had gone silent to avoid detection, or I refused to consider the alternative. I pushed myself harder, ignoring the burning in my lungs and the cuts from branches whipping across my face. I was close to the cave when I heard them, voices and the crashing of underbrush as the hunters approached from the opposite direction. They'd found the creature's trail. Desperation lending me speed, I reached the hidden entrance moments before they came into view. Slipping inside, I found the creature exactly where I'd left it, but significantly worse. Its breathing shallow, its massive body trembling with fever. "They're coming," I whispered urgently. "We need to move deeper into the cave." But the creature didn't respond, didn't move. It was too weak. With a sickening realization, I understood that we were trapped. The hunters would find the entrance any moment, and when they did, they would kill the creature and likely me as well for interfering. In that moment, I made a decision born of desperation rather than logic. Pulling the flare gun from my pack, I moved to the cave entrance. The hunters were less than 50 yards away, scanning the rock face. Taking a deep breath, I aimed the flare gun at a patch of dry underbrush well away from the cave and fired. The effect was immediate. A bright red streak cutting through the morning air, followed by the whoosh of vegetation catching fire. Forest fires were no joke, especially in the dry conditions we'd been experiencing. I knew the blaze would spread quickly, forcing the hunters to retreat or risk being trapped themselves. What I hadn't counted on was the wind shifting, driving the flames not away from the cave, but toward it. Within minutes, smoke began to fill our sanctuary, making it hard to breathe. The creature stirred, panic visible in its eyes despite its weakened state. "We have to go deeper," I insisted, trying to help it rise. But there was nowhere to go. The cave didn't extend much further than the main chamber. We were cornered by my own desperate plan. Outside, I could hear the hunters shouting to each other over the crackling of flames. They were retreating, their prize forgotten in the face of the growing inferno. My plan had worked in driving them away, but at what cost? The smoke was growing thicker by the second, stinging my eyes and burning my lungs. The creature struggled to its feet with my help, but there was nowhere for us to go that wasn't already filling with deadly smoke. In its final act of communication, the creature pushed me toward the entrance. "Go," it seemed to say. "Save yourself." I shook my head, tears cutting tracks through the soot on my face. I couldn't leave it, not after everything. But the creature was insistent, using the last of its strength to physically move me toward the exit. Outside, the forest was transforming into an inferno, trees becoming torches that reached toward the sky. I made it about 20 yards from the cave before the heat became unbearable. Looking back, I saw the creature silhouetted in the entrance, watching me go. Then the flames engulfed the vegetation hiding the opening, and it was gone. I ran blindly through the burning forest, lungs screaming for clean air, skin blistering from the heat. By some miracle, I reached a small stream where the fire hadn't yet spread. Plunging in, I let the cool water soothe my burns as I watched the mountain I'd just fled become engulfed in the most destructive force nature has to offer, all because of my reckless action. The forest fire raged for 3 days, consuming nearly 5,000 acres before firefighters managed to contain it. The official report cited a lightning strike as the probable cause, a convenient explanation that no one questioned too closely. 3 bodies were recovered from the burn area, identified as local men with previous arrests for poaching. Of the creature, no trace was ever found. Whether consumed entirely by the flames or somehow escaped, I'll never know. My burns healed over time, leaving scars that serve as a constant reminder of my fatal error in judgment. Sometimes, on sleepless nights, I find myself staring at a small object I carried away from that mountain. A tiny wooden carving of a human figure that had fallen from the creature's pouch during our escape attempt. I turn it over in my hands and wonder about the intelligence that created it, the being that could read books and create art, that tried to communicate despite our differences. And I wonder if somewhere, deep in Virginia's most remote forests, others of its kind still exist, watching, hiding, and above all, avoiding the most dangerous creature in these woods. Humans like me, whose curiosity and arrogance destroy everything they touch. My name is Vivian Holt, 41 years old, and I've spent most of my life in the coastal city of Norfolk, Virginia, where I work as a paranormal podcast host. It's not exactly what my parents envisioned when they put me through journalism school, but the Whispers in the Dark podcast has a decent following and keeps the lights on. After investigating haunted mansions, abandoned asylums, and cursed objects for 5 years straight, I was starting to feel the creative well running dry. That's when a listener email caught my attention. A story about the Devil's Perch Fire Tower in the western mountains of Virginia, where 3 forest rangers had committed suicide under mysterious circumstances back in the 1970s. The research phase pulled me deep into a rabbit hole of local legends. Devil's Perch had been decommissioned in 1979 after the 3rd suicide, and the locals had plenty of theories about what drove those rangers to jump. Some blamed isolation-induced madness. Others suggested a toxic mold that caused hallucinations, but the most intriguing stories centered around the Whisperer, an entity said to speak to those alone in the tower, slowly driving them to despair. The official Forest Service records noted only that the tower was decommissioned due to structural concerns, but newspaper clippings painted a more disturbing picture. I convinced my sound engineer, Dexter, to accompany me on what I promised would be the episode that would double our listenership. Just 3 days, I assured him over coffee, watching his skeptical expression. We'll hike in, record some atmospheric audio, maybe catch some EVPs, and be back in time for your date on Saturday. Dex had worked with me long enough to know my 3-day estimates usually stretched into a week, but he reluctantly agreed. We'd been friends since college, and he trusted my instincts when it came to finding compelling stories. The drive from Norfolk took most of a day, the scenery gradually transforming from coastal flatlands to the imposing Blue Ridge Mountains. My aging Subaru handled the progressively rougher roads admirably until we reached the Forest Service gate marking the start of the trail to Devil's Perch. According to my research, the tower stood on a remote peak that had once been accessible by a service road, now reclaimed by 2 decades of forest growth. We'd have to hike the last 4 miles with all our equipment. Dex looked dubiously at the dense forest as we shouldered our heavy packs. "You sure about this, Viv?" That ranger back at the station seemed pretty adamant about not going up there. He was right. The ranger had initially refused to tell us how to reach the tower, warning us about deteriorating stairs and unstable platforms. It had taken all my journalistic charm and a made-up story about historical documentation to get directions. Even then, he'd made us sign liability waivers. The trail started pleasantly enough, a clear path winding through ancient oaks and towering pines. But after the first mile, evidence of maintenance disappeared entirely. We clambered over fallen logs and pushed through brambles that tore at our clothes. The forest grew eerily silent the higher we climbed, devoid of the usual woodland sounds. No birds, no skittering creatures in the underbrush, just the sound of our labored breathing and occasional muttered curses when branches slapped our faces. 3 exhausting hours later, we emerged into a small clearing dominated by the imposing silhouette of Devil's Perch. The tower rose nearly 100 feet above us, its metal frame rusted but still sturdy looking. The ranger's warnings about structural integrity seemed exaggerated, at least from ground level. The late afternoon sun cast the structure's shadow across the clearing like a skeletal finger pointing east. "Perfect," I murmured, already planning camera angles for the episode's intro. Dex was less enthusiastic. "There's something wrong about this place," he said quietly, adjusting the recording equipment hanging from his neck. I knew what he meant. Despite being an open clearing, the air felt strangely still and heavy, as if reluctant to be breathed. The temperature had dropped noticeably, though we were standing in direct sunlight. Most disturbing was the silence, a complete absence of sound that seemed to swallow even our footsteps as we approached the tower's base. The first flight of stairs groaned alarmingly under our weight, but held firm. Each subsequent level brought increasing apprehension as the metal stairs swayed slightly with every step. By the time we reached the cabin at the top, a small square room with windows on all sides, my earlier confidence had given way to a creeping unease. The cabin door hung askew on rusted hinges, revealing an interior far more preserved than I'd expected. A wooden desk still stood against one wall, drawers partially open. A cot frame occupied another corner, its mattress long rotted away. Most surprising was an old logbook still chained to the desk, its pages yellowed but largely intact. As Dex set up our recording equipment, I flipped carefully through the logbook, finding mostly routine observations about weather conditions and potential fire hazards. The last entry, dated September 17, 1979, contained only a single line. "It knows my name now." A chill ran down my spine despite the stuffy air in the cabin. According to my research, Ranger Thomas Elliott had jumped to his death from this tower the very next day, the third and final suicide that led to Devil's Perch being abandoned. The sun was setting rapidly, painting the surrounding forest in deep shadows as we finished setting up. Our plan was simple: spend the night recording any unusual sounds or phenomena, then explore the surrounding area tomorrow for additional context. As darkness fell completely, we activated our night vision cameras and settled in for a long vigil. I'd done dozens of overnight stays in supposedly haunted locations and knew the routine well. What I didn't know then was that Devil's Perch would be different from any investigation I'd conducted before, and that by morning, I would understand exactly what had driven those rangers to leap into the darkness below. The first odd occurrence happened around midnight. Dex and I had been taking turns napping, the cramped confines of the tower cabin making it impossible for both of us to lie down simultaneously. I was awake, monitoring our audio equipment and making notes for the podcast narrative when the temperature plummeted. Within seconds, my breath clouded in front of my face, and frost began forming on the interior of the windows, impossible for early September, even at this elevation. "Dex," I whispered, nudging him awake. "Something's happening." He blinked groggily, then sat bolt upright as he registered the unnatural cold. Without speaking, he checked the thermal camera, which was now showing the entire room as a deep blue except for 2 bright heat signatures, our bodies. According to the readout, the ambient temperature had dropped from a comfortable 65 degrees to a bone-chilling 28 in less than a minute. "Equipment malfunction," he suggested, his voice tight with what I recognized as forced rationality. Dex had always been the skeptic to my believer, offering technical explanations for every mysterious recording or photograph. But the frost now creeping across the floorboards couldn't be explained away so easily. I shook my head, watching as our audio levels suddenly spiked on the monitor. What happened next defies easy explanation. The static in our headphones cleared momentarily, replaced by what sounded like dozens of overlapping whispers, too faint to distinguish words, but unmistakably human in their cadence. Dex frantically adjusted levels, trying to clean up the signal, when a single voice suddenly cut through the others, crystal clear despite being barely above a whisper. Vivian. Every hair on my body stood on end as my name floated through our recording equipment. We hadn't told anyone our names at the ranger station. I'd signed the waiver with my podcast pseudonym out of habit. Dex's eyes widened as he stared at me over the equipment. Tell me that wasn't. It was. I confirmed, my mouth suddenly dry. It said my name. Professional curiosity momentarily overrode my fear. Is it still recording? Can we play it back? Dex nodded, rewinding the digital track with trembling fingers. We listened intently, but when we reached the moment when the voice had spoken, there was nothing, just empty static. Whatever had said my name hadn't registered on our equipment. The temperature normalized gradually over the next hour, the frost receding as mysteriously as it had appeared. We remained wide awake, hyper-aware of every creak and groan of the tower's metal frame. Around 2 a.m., Dex stepped outside onto the narrow observation platform to check our external microphones. He'd been gone only a moment when I heard him call out, his voice tight with alarm. "Viv, you need to see this." Something in his tone made my stomach clench as I joined him outside. The night was clear, stars brilliant in the vast sky above, but Dex wasn't looking up. He was staring down at the ground surrounding the tower, illuminated faintly by moonlight. What I saw made no sense. People, at least a dozen of them, standing motionless in a perfect circle around the tower's base. From our height, they appeared as dark silhouettes, faces upturned toward us. "Who are they?" I whispered, instinctively ducking lower though I knew they'd already seen us. "How did they get here without us hearing them?" Dex shook his head, raising his night vision camera to get a better look. I watched his face drain of color as he lowered the device slowly. "They're not." "Right," he managed. When I reached for the camera, he hesitated before handing it over. Through the green-tinted night vision, I could see what had disturbed him so deeply. The figures below were human in shape only. Their proportions were subtly wrong. Limbs too long, necks at impossible angles, faces smooth and featureless except for wide, unblinking eyes that reflected the moonlight like a cat's. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to flicker occasionally, like bad television reception. We retreated into the cabin, securing the door though it felt like a meaningless gesture. Whatever was outside, a simple door wouldn't keep it out. Our equipment continued to record, though both of us doubted it would capture anything useful. The entities, I couldn't think of them as people anymore, didn't move or attempt to climb the tower. They simply watched, their collective gaze a physical pressure I could feel through the walls. Dawn arrived with agonizing slowness. When the first gray light filtered through the windows, I ventured another look outside. The clearing was empty, no trace of our night visitors. Dex was reviewing our overnight footage with increasing frustration. "Nothing," he reported. "Not a single anomaly recorded. No temperature drop, no audio spike, no figures on the ground." He looked up at me, dark circles under his eyes. If I didn't know better, I'd say we both hallucinated the whole thing. I flipped through the tower logbook again, this time reading more carefully. Between routine entries, I found disturbing notations. Voices on the wind again tonight. Saw the circle gatherers, holding position until dawn. They're finding ways inside now. The entries grew increasingly paranoid and disjointed toward the end, culminating in that final ominous line about something knowing the ranger's name. The sensible option was to pack up and leave immediately, but journalistic instinct, and perhaps something darker, a pull I didn't fully recognize yet, made me suggest exploring the area first. "Just a quick sweep," I assured Dex, who looked ready to begin the descent without delay. "There might be something that explains what we experienced. Old mining operations that could cause hallucinations, unusual magnetic fields, something." He reluctantly agreed, and we spent the morning investigating the immediate vicinity of the tower. About half a mile north, we discovered the remnants of what appeared to be an old campsite. Not recent campers, but something older. Stone formations arranged in that same perfect circle we'd seen the figures forming. Small carved totems hung from surrounding trees, weathered by years of exposure, but still recognizable as crude human forms with exaggerated eyes. Native American? Dex suggested, examining one of the totems without touching it. I shook my head. Doesn't match any indigenous artwork I've seen from this region. This is something else. The carvings gave me the same unsettled feeling as our visitors from the night before. Almost human, but wrong in subtle, disturbing ways. As I leaned closer to examine the stone circle, a sharp pain lanced through my head, accompanied by a whisper so close it could have been inside my own skull. Stay, Vivian. We have so much to show you. I reeled back, bumping into Dex, who steadied me with concern. What's wrong? You went white as a sheet. I couldn't bring myself to tell him about the voice, fear rapidly giving way to an even more disturbing sensation, longing. Part of me wanted to hear more, wanted to stay on this mountain and listen to whatever was speaking to me. It was the same pull I'd felt earlier, now intensified to an almost physical tug. We returned to the tower to collect our equipment, but as we began packing, my movements grew sluggish. The thought of leaving filled me with inexplicable dread. Dex noticed my hesitation, worry creasing his brow. Viv, we need to get going if we want to reach the trailhead before dark. His voice seemed to come from far away, though he stood right beside me. The cabin had begun to feel comforting, familiar, like a place I belonged. I think, I said slowly, the words forming with difficulty, I should stay another night, to get more footage. The suggestion came from my lips, but the intention didn't feel entirely my own. Dex stared at me like I'd grown a second head. After what happened last night? No way. We're leaving, both of us, right now. He grabbed my pack and thrust it into my arms, his decisive action breaking through the strange fog that had enveloped my thoughts. I nodded, suddenly aware of how bizarre my suggestion had been. Something on this mountain was affecting my mind, trying to keep me here. As we descended the tower stairs, I could feel it watching, not with eyes, but with a presence that permeated the very air. The first sign of trouble came halfway down the trail. We'd been hiking for about an hour when I realized we should have reached a distinctive lightning-struck tree I'd noted on our way up. Dex, I called ahead. Does any of this look familiar to you? He paused, surveying our surroundings with growing concern. The forest seemed denser here, the undergrowth more tangled, though we were supposedly following the same trail we'd ascended yesterday. We must have taken a wrong turn, he concluded, pulling out his GPS unit. The small screen showed only error messages. No signal could penetrate the thick canopy above. My phone similarly showed no service. The paper map I'd brought as backup revealed another problem. The landmarks around us didn't match anything charted on the established trails. Somehow, we'd wandered off course despite following what appeared to be a clear path. As afternoon faded toward evening, the disturbing truth became unavoidable. We were lost, walking in circles despite our best attempts to maintain a straight course down the mountain. Every time we thought we'd found the right direction, the trail would twist unexpectedly or simply disappear into impenetrable thickets. It was as if the forest itself was redirecting us, herding us like sheep. And always, we found ourselves facing back toward Devil's Perch, its metal frame visible through breaks in the trees, growing no more distant despite hours of walking away from it. The sun was setting when Dex stopped abruptly, holding up a hand for silence. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. At first, I heard nothing but the usual forest sounds that had returned once we'd left the tower's immediate vicinity. Then it reached me, a soft, rhythmic chanting coming from somewhere ahead. Human voices, many of them, joined in a cadence that made my skin crawl. Dex and I exchanged glances, both recognizing that we faced an impossible choice: spend the night lost in increasingly dark woods, or move toward the only other human presence on this mountain, as unnatural as it seemed. We chose to approach the chanting, moving cautiously through the deepening shadows. What we found in a small clearing ahead stopped us dead in our tracks. The same circle of figures we'd seen from the tower stood swaying slightly, hands joined, their blank faces now covered in symbols painted with some dark substance. In the center of their circle burned a small fire, casting writhing shadows that seemed to move independently of the figures creating them. And there, suspended above the flames in defiance of physics or sanity, floated the logbook from the tower, pages flipping by themselves as if read by invisible hands. The sight was so impossible, so utterly wrong, that for several seconds I couldn't process what I was seeing. The suspended logbook rotated slowly above the flames, yet didn't burn. The chanting figures, I still couldn't think of them as people, stayed locked in their circle, unaware or unconcerned by our presence at the edge of the clearing. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my body remained frozen, caught between fear and a morbid fascination that didn't feel entirely my own. Dex recovered first, grabbing my arm and pulling me behind a massive oak at the clearing's edge. "What the hell is that?" he hissed, his face ghostly in the dim light. I shook my head, unable to offer any explanation that wouldn't sound like madness. We crouched behind the tree, watching as the ceremony, for that's what it clearly was, continued. The chanting grew louder, more urgent, rising and falling in patterns that seemed to distort the very air around the circle. Then, abruptly, the chanting stopped. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any sound could have been. I risked another look around the tree trunk and immediately wished I hadn't. The figures had turned as one, their blank faces now oriented directly toward our hiding place. They couldn't possibly see us in the darkness beyond the firelight, yet they knew exactly where we stood. One figure, taller than the rest, its proportions even more disturbingly wrong, stepped forward and extended an impossibly long arm toward us. When it spoke, its voice was a discordant blend of many voices, some high and childlike, others deep and guttural. "Come join our circle, Vivian Holt. We've been waiting for you." My name on its lips sent ice through my veins. Without conscious thought, I found myself taking a step forward, drawn by something in that chorus of voices. A promise, an answer to questions I hadn't even formulated yet. Dex's grip tightened painfully on my arm, anchoring me in place. "Don't," he whispered fiercely. "They know your name, Viv. Just like the logbook, it knows my name now. Remember?" His words broke through the strange compulsion, and I nodded shakily. Together, we began backing away from the clearing, moving as quietly as possible through the underbrush. The figures didn't follow, but I could feel their collective gaze like a physical weight between my shoulder blades as we retreated. We ran blindly through the darkening forest, branches whipping our faces, roots threatening to trip us with every step. After what seemed like hours but was probably only minutes, we collapsed against a fallen log, lungs burning. "We need shelter," Dex panted, glancing fearfully over his shoulder. "It'll be completely dark soon, and we can't keep wandering aimlessly." As if in answer to his concerns, a shape loomed suddenly from the gloom ahead, the tower. Despite having run in the opposite direction from it, we'd somehow circled back. Devil's Perch stood silhouetted against the purple twilight sky, a dark sentinel that seemed to be watching our futile attempts to escape. For a long moment, we stared at it in disbelief. "This isn't possible," Dex muttered, pulling out his compass. The needle spun wildly, rotating in complete circles without settling. "Nothing about this place makes sense." He looked at me, the unspoken question hanging between us. What now? The decision was made for us as distant chanting rose once more from the forest behind us, closer now, moving in our direction. "The tower," I said reluctantly. "At least we can barricade the door, have some protection." Dex nodded grimly, and we moved toward the structure that seemed determined to keep us in its shadow. Climbing the metal stairs in near darkness was a test of nerves. Every creak and groan of the aged structure sent adrenaline coursing through my system. By the time we reached the cabin at the top, full night had fallen. The only illumination came from the half-moon rising over the eastern ridge, casting the cabin in silvery light that did little to dispel the growing shadows in the corners. Our equipment still lay where we'd left it, though I could have sworn we'd packed most of it before attempting to leave. Dex's video camera sat perfectly centered on the desk, pointed at the cot, a deliberate arrangement neither of us had made. Most disturbing of all, the logbook we'd seen floating above the fire in the clearing now lay open on the desk, though we'd watched it from a distance only minutes ago. "This can't be happening," Dex whispered, staring at the logbook. I moved cautiously toward the desk, drawn by morbid curiosity. The book was open to a new entry, the handwriting jagged and rushed. September 20th, 2024. They're watching from the trees. They know my name now. They say I'm to be the new keeper. God help me. Today's date. In my handwriting. I stumbled back from the desk, colliding with Dex, who steadied me with trembling hands. I didn't write that. I insisted, though the evidence before us suggested otherwise. I never touched the book since we got back. The chanting outside had stopped, but a new sound replaced it. Footsteps on the metal stairs, slow and deliberate. Something was climbing toward us. Dex rushed to the door, throwing his weight against it and shooting home the ancient bolt that miraculously still functioned. The footsteps continued their measured ascent, unhurried, confident. The windows, I gasped, moving to secure the shutters that hung loosely from rusted hinges. As I reached for the first one, a face appeared on the other side of the glass. Or something like a face, a smooth oval with indentations where features should be, pressed against the pane like a curious child. I screamed, jerking backward as more faces appeared at every window, watching us with eyeless gazes. The footsteps reached the landing outside our door. A soft tapping followed, almost polite in its restraint. When the voice came, it seeped through the cracks around the door, a whisper that somehow filled the entire cabin. "You cannot leave this place, Keeper. The tower has chosen you, as it chose those before you." The voice was neither male nor female, young nor old. It simply was, ancient and patient. "Open the door. Accept your purpose." Dex grabbed a metal chair, bracing it under the doorknob. "Don't listen," he urged me, though his voice shook with barely controlled panic. "They're trying to get in your head, just like they did with those rangers." The tapping at the door stopped, replaced by an eerie scraping sound, nails or claws dragging slowly down the wood. "She already belongs to us," the voice continued, now seeming to come from inside the cabin itself. "She has been ours since she first heard our call in her dreams, drawing her to this mountain. Ask her why she really came here." Dex turned to me, confusion mingling with the fear in his eyes. "What is it talking about?" "The truth. A truth I'd buried beneath layers of professional curiosity and podcast planning, rose unwanted to my consciousness. The nightmares that had plagued me for months before finding that listener email. Always the same. A tower against the night sky, a circle of watchers, a voice calling me by name. I dismissed them as stressed dreams, random firings of an overactive imagination. But they hadn't been random at all. They'd been a summons. "I've dreamed about this place," I admitted, my voice barely audible, "long before I ever knew it existed." Saying it aloud seemed to strengthen whatever influence was pressing against my mind. The cabin walls began to waver like a heat mirage, reality becoming thin and permeable. Through this distortion, I could see other figures. The previous fire watchers I somehow knew, going about their duties in this same cabin across different decades. Each one looked toward me with expressions of mingled pity and relief, as if passing on a burden they'd carried too long. The scraping at the door intensified, with splintering under pressure no human hand could exert. Dex dragged me to the farthest corner, placing himself between me and the door in a gesture of protection that seemed futile against the forces gathering around us. The faces at the windows pressed harder against the glass, which began to crack under their weight. "Tell me what's happening," Dex pleaded. "Maybe if we understand, we can fight it." But understanding was precisely what I feared. The knowledge was there now, flooding into my mind like water through a broken dam. Devil's Perch wasn't just a fire tower. It was a watchtower of a different kind, one of several built at strategic locations across the Appalachians. The entities outside weren't trying to get in. They were guardians, and I was meant to join them in their vigil. They watched the boundaries. I found myself saying, the words coming from some place beyond conscious thought. Places where the world grows thin. They need human eyes, human minds to interpret what comes through. What comes through from where? Dex demanded, but his voice seemed distant, unimportant compared to the revelation unfolding in my mind. The door gave way with a final crack, swinging open to reveal not the landing and stairs beyond, but a swirling darkness punctuated by points of light that were not stars. The tall figure stood framed in this impossible doorway, its blank face now acquiring features. My features, I realized with horror, as it extended a hand toward me. "The circle requires a keeper," it said, its voice now matching my own. "The tower must be manned. The boundary must be watched. Behind it, through the swirling portal, shapes moved, massive, indistinct forms that hurt the eye and mind to observe directly. They are waking on the other side. Without a watcher, they will find their way through. Dex grabbed my shoulders, shaking me hard. Don't listen. Whatever you're seeing, it's not real. But his words couldn't compete with the terrible truth unfolding before me. This was what had driven the previous Rangers to jump. Not madness or despair, but understanding. They had seen what waited beyond the boundaries of our reality, and they had chosen death over becoming its keeper. I had a choice to make, and quickly. The entities were fully inside the cabin now, their circle reforming around us. Dex swung a chair wildly at the nearest one, but it passed through the figure as if through smoke. They weren't physical beings, at least not entirely, which explained why our equipment had never registered their presence. The moment of decision arrived as the tall figure, my doppelganger, reached for my hand. Join the circle, become the keeper, or find another way out. The Rangers had chosen to jump rather than accept this burden. As the cold fingers brushed mine, I finally understood why, and what I had to do to save us both from a fate worse than death. The touch of those fingers sent electric shock waves through my system. Not painful, but transformative, as if my very atoms were being rearranged. Colors I had no names for exploded across my vision. Sounds beyond human hearing range suddenly became audible. The heartbeat of the mountain itself, the whispered conversations of trees communicating through their root systems, the background radiation of the universe humming like distant machinery. Viv. Dex's voice cut through the overwhelming sensory barrage, an anchor to reality as I knew it. He was pulling at my arm, trying to break the connection between me and my doppelganger. But the entity held firm, its features becoming more defined with each passing second. Not just wearing my face now, but becoming me in some fundamental way I couldn't fully comprehend. The cabin around us had disappeared entirely, replaced by a vast, empty space where ribbons of light and darkness twined together like cosmic serpents. The circle of watchers stood unmoving around us, their blank faces turned outward, focused on something beyond my perception, guarding the boundary, just as they'd said. And beyond that boundary, I caught glimpses of what they were watching, vast shapes moving in a space that wasn't space as humans understood it. The sight of them caused physical pain, my mind rejecting information it wasn't equipped to process. I understood now why the Keeper needed to be human, but not entirely so. A bridge between realities, transformed enough to perceive the threat, but still connected enough to this world to care about protecting it. Let go of her, Dex was shouting, his voice distorted as if traveling through water. He had wrapped his arms around my waist, pulling me backward with all his strength. The entity holding my hand showed the first sign of emotion, annoyance, flickering across my own features reflected back at me. With a casual gesture of its free hand, it sent Dex flying backward. He hit something solid that shouldn't have existed in this non-space and crumpled to the ground, unmoving. Terror for him broke through my trance-like state. "Stop," I commanded, surprising myself with the power in my voice. More surprising was that the entity actually paused, its head tilting in curiosity. "I'll listen to what you want," I continued, "but he stays safe. That's my condition." The entity considered this for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds. "The human is unimportant," it finally said with my voice. "But his safety can be arranged if you accept your role willingly." It gestured toward Dex's unconscious form. "He will be returned to his world with no memory of this place. That is the most we can offer. And what exactly is this role you want me to accept?" I demanded, trying to ignore the continuing transformation I could feel happening inside me. My perception was expanding exponentially, awareness stretching beyond the confines of my physical body. Soon, I suspected, I wouldn't be human enough to leave even if I wanted to. In answer, the entity pulled me forward, the circle of watchers parting to reveal what they had been facing. A boundary, that was the only word my mind could supply for the phenomenon before me. A shimmering curtain of energy that separated our reality from elsewhere. And along that boundary, dark shapes pressed against the barrier, testing, probing for weaknesses. The sight filled me with instinctive dread. These were not beings that should ever enter our world. "The boundary weakens," my doppelganger explained. "It has always required watching, but now more than ever. The old keepers have passed beyond, and we cannot maintain the vigil without a human consciousness to anchor us to your reality. The Rangers, I whispered, understanding dawning. They weren't suicides. They were what? Sacrifices? Transformations? Ascensions, the entity corrected. They served their time as keepers, then joined us beyond the boundary. But the last one left no replacement. The tower has stood empty for too long. It gestured toward the shapes pressing against the barrier. They sense the weakness. They grow bold. As if to emphasize this point, something massive slammed against the boundary, causing ripples of distortion to spread across its surface. The watchers raised their arms in unison, channeling some form of energy that reinforced the weakened area. The effort clearly strained them. Why me? I asked, though I was beginning to suspect the answer. The dreams, the compulsion to investigate this place. I hadn't discovered Devil's Perch. It had called to me specifically. You hear the spaces between worlds, the entity said simply. Not all humans can. You were born with the ability to perceive what others cannot. You felt it all your life, have you not? The sense that reality as others experience it is merely a comfortable illusion. It wasn't wrong. My fascination with the paranormal hadn't begun with the podcast. It had been with me since childhood. The certainty that the world held more than what most people perceived. The feeling of something just beyond my peripheral vision that disappeared when I turned to look directly at it. I'd channeled those intuitions into a career investigating haunted places, but deep down, I'd always been searching for confirmation of what I already knew. Reality was much thinner, much more permeable than most humans realized. If I agree, I said slowly, what happens to me? Do I replace you? Become you? The thought was both terrifying and, in some strange way, alluring, to transcend human limitations, to see and know what lay beyond the veil most people never even noticed. You remain yourself, but more, the entity explained. You will watch from the tower in your world, perceiving both realities simultaneously. When danger threatens the boundary, you will alert the circle. Sometimes, you will join us here, when your unique abilities are needed to reinforce the weakened points. And when my time is served, what then? I glanced at Dex, still unconscious. Whatever choice I made now would separate me from him, from my life in Norfolk, from everything familiar. Then you may choose. Return to your humanity, memories of your service wiped clean, or ascend fully to join the circle. The entity's expression softened slightly, looking more like me, more human. It is not an eternal sentence, keeper, merely a duty, vital but temporary. Another violent impact against the boundary punctuated this statement. The watchers were struggling now, their forms flickering like bad television reception as they fought to maintain the integrity of the barrier. Whatever lay on the other side was growing more determined to break through. I thought of the logbook entry I hadn't written. They say I'm to be the new keeper. God help me. Had some part of me already accepted this role, even as my conscious mind resisted? The entity still held my hand, our fingers intertwined. I could feel the transformation continuing, awareness expanding to encompass perceptions no human mind was designed to process. Soon, the choice would be made by default as I became too changed to return to my former life. Time for a decision. I looked at Dex one last time, memorizing his face. Then I turned back to my doppelganger, my guide, my future self. I'll do it, I said firmly. I'll become the keeper. But you keep your word. Dex goes free, safe, with no memory of this place. The entity's face, my face, broke into a smile of genuine relief. It is agreed. It released my hand and stepped back, joining the circle of watchers. As it moved away, I felt a rush of power surge through me, knowledge flooding my consciousness. Ancient wisdom and cosmic awareness previously inaccessible to my human mind. The transformation accelerated, my perception expanding beyond the limitations of human senses. I could see the boundary for what it truly was, an intricate latticework of energy separating our reality from something vast and hungry. The entities pressing against it weren't malevolent in any human sense. They simply operated according to principles incompatible with our universe. Their intrusion would be catastrophic, reality unraveling wherever they touched our world. The ritual must be completed, my doppelganger announced. The circle began to chant, their voices resonating at frequencies that vibrated through multiple dimensions. I found myself joining in, the words coming instinctively though they belonged to no human language. As we chanted, my body began to fade, becoming translucent, while simultaneously I felt myself anchored to the tower. I existed in two places at once, here in this space beyond space, and back in the physical cabin atop Devil's Perch. The dichotomy should have torn my mind apart, but my expanded consciousness accommodated the duality with surprising ease. I watched as two watchers lifted Dex's unconscious form with impossible gentleness. A portal opened directly to the Forest Service Road where we'd parked days earlier. They carried him through, laying him beside my Subaru. One placed a hand on his forehead, ensuring his memories would fade into vague impressions and half-remembered dreams. "It is done," the watchers announced upon their return. "The circle is complete once more. The boundary is secured. Time flows differently when you exist partially outside it." During my first weeks as keeper, I maintained a physical presence in the tower, sleeping, eating food that mysteriously appeared each morning, recording observations in the logbook, while my consciousness routinely slipped beyond the boundary to join the watchers in their vigil. The entities never ceased their efforts, sometimes applying brute force, other times whispering into the dreams of sensitive humans. I learned that Devil's Perch was just one of several nexus points where the boundary required monitoring. Other towers existed worldwide, each with its own keeper. The logbook became my anchor to humanity. Each day I recorded events both mundane and extraordinary. During moments of clarity, I wondered about my former life, my podcast, my apartment in Norfolk, friends who must surely be searching for me. Dex would have reported me missing, though his memories would be fragmented. I imagined authorities combing these mountains, finding my abandoned equipment, but never discovering what truly happened. 3 months into my vigil, as autumn painted the forest below in crimson and gold, I sensed a human presence approaching, the first since Dex had been sent away. As I extended my awareness, I recognized his consciousness. He had returned despite his altered memories, driven by fragments of recollection and conviction that answers about my disappearance lay here. I waited in the cabin as he climbed the tower stairs. When the door opened, the shock on his face told me how much I had changed. My physical form remained superficially human, but subtle alterations were apparent. My eyes reflecting light differently, my movements too fluid, my skin occasionally shimmering with energy. "Viv?" he whispered, clutching the doorframe. "What happened to you?" For a moment, I couldn't speak, human language feeling inadequate after months of communicating through pure thought. "You shouldn't have come back, Dex. Everyone thinks you're dead," he said. "I've had dreams about this place for months. Couldn't remember exactly what happened, but I knew you were still here." Before I could respond, I felt it, a massive pressure against the boundary, stronger than any previous attempt. My consciousness was instantly pulled toward the breach, even as my body remained with Dex. Through my expanded perception, I saw the barrier bulging inward, watchers struggling to contain the intrusion. Something had coordinated an attack, sensing the keeper's momentary distraction. I doubled over as my awareness stretched painfully between worlds. "Dex, you have to go? Now." "I'm not leaving you again," he insisted, touching my shoulder. In that moment, our connection completed an unexpected circuit. For a brief second, Dex saw what I saw: the boundary, the watchers, the entities beyond. He staggered backward, eyes wide with newfound understanding. "My God," he whispered, "that's what you're guarding against." I pressed the logbook into his hands. "If I don't return by dawn, take this to the ranger station. Another keeper will be called." Before he could respond, I surrendered to the pull, my physical form dissolving as my consciousness joined the watchers. The attack was a coordinated assault by dozens of entities striking at a known weakness. Through our combined efforts, we reinforced the barrier, though the battle left me further transformed, the human part of me diminishing. When I returned to the tower at dawn, Dex waited, the logbook open on his lap. "You're back," he said simply. I nodded, though the gesture felt strangely performative, a human affectation I was rapidly outgrowing. "For now, I read it all," he said. "Those rangers, they weren't lost to madness. They were keepers who served their time. Yes, each served for years before choosing their fate, ascension or return. And you? What will you choose when your time comes?" The question resonated through my transforming consciousness. Return to a humanity that would feel confining? Or ascend fully, leaving behind all connections to my former life? I don't know yet, I answered truthfully. But that choice is years away. Dex nodded slowly. You should go, I told him. Create a story about what happened to me, something people will believe. Let Vivian Holt rest in peace. Understanding passed between us. Our paths, once aligned, now diverged toward irreconcilable destinies. I touched his forehead gently, feeling our connection. You'll remember enough to know your friend found her purpose, but not so much it haunts you. I watched from the tower as he descended, morning mist swallowing his figure. Part of me wanted to call him back, to grasp at my fading humanity through this last connection to my former life. But the watcher I was becoming understood the necessity of separation. When he was gone, I made my final entry as Vivian Holt, podcast host and paranormal investigator. October 15th, 2024. The tower stands. The boundary holds. The keeper watches. And the world below sleeps safely, unaware of the vigil maintained in forgotten places like Devil's Perch. Then I closed the book and took my place at the window, gazing not just at the forest, but at the spaces between, where reality grew thin and my true work waited. The tower had chosen well. I would watch, and I would guard, for as long as the boundary required. Years later, a young journalist researching disappearances in the Appalachians discovered a final episode of Whispers in the Dark, released posthumously by the show's sound engineer. Most listeners dismissed it as fiction, a creative send-off for the missing host. But some felt a deeper truth resonating in the recording. These rare individuals might dream of a tower against night skies, watchers standing vigil, and a woman with knowing eyes guarding a boundary only she could see. Some might even seek out forgotten watchtowers in remote corners of the world. Most would turn back before venturing where reality grew thin. But occasionally, one would continue forward, climbing worn metal stairs to find a logbook waiting and a presence that had been expecting them. For the boundary requires watching, and the watchers require keepers. And somewhere between our world and whatever lies beyond, Vivian Holt continues her vigil, no longer fully human, but never forgetting what it means to be humanity's guardian at the edge of everything we know. I'm Ezra Caldwell, 29 years old, from Richmond, Virginia. I've always been a city guy, but last summer, I craved something different, something wild. So, I packed my old Jeep and headed to Shenandoah National Forest, near Harrisonburg, for a solo camping trip. My buddy Theo, a park ranger out that way, told me about High Knob Fire Tower, a stone relic from the 1940s with insane views. He said it was a must-see, perched on the Virginia-West Virginia border. I figured I'd hike up, camp nearby, and soak in the solitude. I wasn't alone, though. I'd convinced my cousin Lila, 25, a photographer from Roanoke, and her friend Marcus, 32, a history nerd from Charlottesville, to join me. They're both outdoorsy, but Marcus is a bit of a know-it-all, always rattling off facts about old structures like the tower. Lila's quieter, always chasing the perfect shot with her camera. The drive to Shenandoah was smooth, just me and the hum of the Jeep's tires on I-81. I'd been itching to escape the city's noise. Richmond's bars and traffic were wearing me thin. The forest felt like a reset button. We met at a diner in Harrisonburg, where Lila was already sketching out photo ideas, and Marcus was geeking out about the Civilian Conservation Corps building the tower in '39. We grabbed supplies, camping gear, food, a map, and headed to the trailhead. The air was crisp, the kind that makes you feel alive. I parked the Jeep at an unmarked lot off Route 33, right by a trail kiosk. No signs, just a yellow blaze marking the Shenandoah Mountain Trail. My heart was pumping, not from fear, but from that buzz you get when you're about to dive into something new. The hike to the campsite was only 1.5 miles, but it was steep. My boots crunched on loose gravel, and I could hear Lila snapping photos behind me. Marcus kept pointing out random plants, claiming they were historically significant. I just nodded, half listening, focused on the trail. We found a clearing near the base of High Knob, perfect for our tents. The tower loomed above, a squat stone structure with a wooden cab, looking like it belonged in some old horror flick. I laughed it off, joking about ghosts of old fire lookouts. Lila rolled her eyes, but Marcus launched into a story about a ranger who died in a fire nearby in the 30s. Don got in ear, he said, all serious. Tragic stuff. I brushed it off, but the way the tower's shadow stretched across the clearing felt off. Setting up camp was easy enough. I hammered tent stakes while Lila scouted for good angles to shoot the sunset. Marcus insisted on building the fire, though he nearly singed his beard trying to light damp wood. We cooked hot dogs over the flames, and I cracked open a beer, feeling the stress of city life melt away. The forest was quiet, just the crackle of the fire and the occasional hoot of an owl. I leaned back, staring at the stars poking through the canopy. Lila was fiddling with her camera, muttering about light exposure. Marcus, predictably, started rambling about local myths, something about a wraith of the knob, a spirit tied to the tower. I chuckled, but Lila shot me a look, like she wasn't so sure it was funny. The night settled in, cold and heavy. We swapped stories, mostly dumb ones from college, but Marcus kept circling back to the tower. He said lookouts used to stay up there for weeks, scanning for fires, totally isolated. Some went crazy, he said, eyes glinting in the firelight. I told him to quit trying to scare us, but I couldn't shake the image of someone alone up there, staring into the dark. Lila suggested we hike to the tower at dawn for photos. I agreed, thinking it'd be cool to climb the catwalk and see the view. The wind picked up, rustling the trees, and I zipped my jacket tighter. Nothing creepy, just nature, right? But as I crawled into my tent, I couldn't help glancing at the tower, its silhouette stark against the moon. Morning came fast. I woke to the smell of dew and pine, my sleeping bag damp from the ground. Lila was already up, brewing coffee on a camp stove. Marcus was scribbling in a notebook, probably jotting down more tower trivia. We ate quickly, granola bars and instant oatmeal, and packed light for the hike. The trail to High Knob was short but brutal, all uphill. My legs burned, but the promise of that 360-degree view kept me going. The tower came into sight, its stone base moss-covered and ancient-looking. 30 rickety wooden steps led to the cab. I climbed first, the wind whipping my face. The view was unreal, miles of rolling Blue Ridge mountains, green and endless. But something about the cab's dusty windows gave me a chill, like someone was watching. Lila was snapping photos like a maniac, muttering about perfect light. Marcus was in his element, pointing out the tower's alidade, a tool lookouts used to pinpoint fires. He said it was an Osborne fire finder, like it was the Holy Grail. I tried to focus on the view, but my eyes kept drifting to the cab's interior. It was empty, just old wood and cobwebs, but it felt heavy, like the air was thicker inside. I shook it off, blaming Marcus's ghost stories. We hung out for a bit, soaking in the scenery, then headed back to camp. The forest felt different on the way down, quieter, somehow. No birds, no rustling, just our footsteps. I didn't say anything, but I noticed Lila glancing over her shoulder. Back at camp, we decided to stay another night. The plan was to explore more trails, maybe hit a nearby lake Marcus kept talking about. I was all in for it, craving more of that forest vibe. But as we unpacked, I noticed my Jeep's keys weren't in my pocket. I tore through my bag, cursing. Lila helped me look, while Marcus just stood there, smirking, saying I probably dropped them on the trail. We retraced our steps to the tower, but no luck. The keys were gone. I tried to stay calm, but a knot formed in my gut. We were stuck, miles from anywhere, with no cell service. The sun was dipping low, and the tower's shadow stretched longer, like it was reaching for us. As dusk fell, I couldn't shake the feeling we weren't alone. The forest was too still, the kind of quiet that screams trouble. Lila kept checking her camera, saying some of her photos from the tower looked weird, blurry spots where there shouldn't be. Marcus, for once, didn't have a snappy comeback. He just stared at the tower, like he was seeing something I wasn't. I told myself it was just the stress of losing the keys, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. The air felt charged, like before a storm, but the sky was clear. I grabbed a flashlight, trying to act like everything was fine. But as the dark closed in, that horror vibe I'd laughed off earlier started creeping up my spine. The campfire was down to embers, and I was pacing, flashlight in hand, trying to figure out how I'd lost my damn Jeep keys. Lila sat cross-legged, scrolling through her camera's photos, her face lit by the screen's glow. She kept muttering about those blurry spots, saying they looked like shapes, human shapes. I told her it was probably just lens flares, but my voice sounded shakier than I meant. Marcus, leaning against a tree, was no help, just muttering about how we'd have to hike out to Route 33 for help. That was a 6-mile trek, and it was already dark. The idea of stumbling through Shenandoah National Forest at night gave me a disturbing chill, like I was in some low-budget horror movie. I suggested we stay put till morning, but Marcus wasn't having it. We argued for a bit, me wanting to wait, Marcus pushing to leave now. Lila stayed quiet, her eyes flicking to the tower's silhouette up the hill. Finally, we compromised. We'd search the campsite one more time for the keys, then decide. I tore through my tent, shaking out my sleeping bag, checking every pocket. Nothing. Lila dumped her backpack, and a granola bar wrapper fell out, reminding me of those times you lose something obvious, like your phone in the couch. But these keys? Gone. Marcus, meanwhile, was poking around the fire pit, claiming he was reconstructing where I'd been. His smug tone was grating, and I snapped, telling him to quit playing detective. He smirked, but shut up. As we searched, Lila froze, holding up her camera. "Ezra, look at this," she whispered. I leaned over, and my stomach dropped. One photo from the tower showed the cab's interior, but there was a faint outline, tall, humanoid, near the alidate. It wasn't there when we were up there. I tried to laugh it off, saying it was a smudge, but the image felt wrong. Like when you see something out of the corner of your eye and can't explain it. Marcus grabbed the camera, squinting. "Could be a reflection," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. The air felt heavier, like the forest was holding its breath. I didn't want to admit it, but that photo was scary as hell. We decided to stick together and check the trail to the tower again, just in case. Flashlights in hand, we climbed the steep path, the beams cutting through the dark. The forest was dead silent. No crickets, no owls. It was like nature had clocked out. I kept my eyes on the ground, hoping to spot the keys glint, but my mind was on that photo. Lila was behind me, her breathing uneven, like she was spooked. Marcus, for once, wasn't talking, just scanning the trees. Halfway up, I tripped on a root, nearly face-planting. I cursed, and Lila grabbed my arm, her grip tight. "Did you see that?" she hissed, pointing to the left. I swung my flashlight, but there was nothing, just trees and shadows. When we reached the tower, it looked even creepier at night, its stone base swallowing the light. The wooden steps creaked as I climbed, my heart pounding. I didn't want to go in the cab, but I forced myself, shining the flashlight around. Empty, just dust and that damn alidate. But the air felt thick, like it was pressing on my chest. Marcus climbed up behind me, muttering about the wraith of the knob again. "Don Gardinier's ghost," he said, half joking, but his eyes were wide. I told him to cut it out, but my voice cracked. Lila stayed below, snapping photos, saying she needed to document it. I didn't like how her hands were shaking. We found nothing. No keys, no answers. Back at camp, we sat around the fire, trying to plan. Marcus suggested hot wiring the Jeep, but I shot that down. I'm no mechanic, and the last thing we needed was a fried engine. Lila proposed hiking to a ranger station at dawn, about 8 miles east. It sounded brutal, but doable. I nodded, but my gut was screaming that something was off. The forest didn't feel right anymore. It was like when you're home alone and hear a creak upstairs. Nothing you can prove, but it's disturbing. I kept glancing at the tower, its outline barely visible in the moonlight. Why did it feel like it was watching us? Lila showed us another photo, this one from the trail just now. Another blurry shape, this time closer, near a tree. My mouth went dry. "It's just dirt on the lens," I said, but I didn't believe it. Marcus, usually so chatty, just stared at the fire. I could tell he was rattled, which made it worse. He's the guy who'd argue with a brick wall, but now? Silent. We agreed to take turns keeping watch, just in case. I volunteered first, gripping my flashlight like a weapon. The night stretched on, and every rustle made my skin crawl. I kept thinking about that old ranger, Don Gardinier, and the stories Marcus told. Were they just stories? Around 2 a.m., I heard something, a low hum, like a distant engine, but it wasn't coming from the road. It was from the tower. I froze, straining to listen. It stopped, then started again, faint but steady. I woke Lila, who was curled up in her sleeping bag. "You hear that?" I whispered. She nodded, eyes wide. Marcus stirred, grumbling, but when he heard it, he sat up fast. We sat there, listening, as the hum grew louder, then faded. It wasn't mechanical, it felt alive, like a voice. My heart was racing, and that horror vibe was back, stronger now. I told myself it was just the wind, but I knew better. Something was out there, and it wasn't friendly. As we sat, frozen, Lila's camera beeped, low battery or something. She checked it, and her face went pale. "It's recording," she said, voice trembling. I didn't start it. The screen showed grainy footage of the campsite, but none of us were in it. Just our tents, the fire, and a tall, blurry figure standing at the edge of the clearing. My blood ran cold. We huddled closer, flashlights trained on the dark, waiting for dawn. The hum was gone, but the silence was worse. It felt like the forest was waiting, too, and whatever was out there knew we were here. I sat by the dying fire, clutching the flashlight, my eyes darting to every shadow. Lila was hunched over her camera, replaying that creepy footage over and over. The blurry figure in it didn't move, just stood there, tall and wrong, like it was staring right at us. Marcus was pacing now, muttering about how we should have left hours ago. I wanted to snap at him, but my throat was tight. That hum from the tower was gone, but the silence was worse, like the forest was holding its breath. I kept thinking about those old Virginia myths Marcus mentioned, the Wraith of the Knob, Don Gaudenier's ghost. I'd laughed it off before, but now, that horror vibe was choking me. Something was out there, and it wasn't just my imagination. Lila whispered my name, her voice shaky. She pointed at the camera screen. The footage had changed. The figure was closer now, just outside the tent line, its edges sharper, like it was stepping into focus. My heart slammed against my ribs. "Turn it off," I hissed, but she couldn't stop staring. Marcus grabbed the camera, shutting it down, but not before I saw it. A face, or something like one, blank and pale. It was like those nightmares where you know something's watching, but you can't move. We sat there, frozen, listening for anything. Then it came, a low scrape, like nails on wood, from the direction of the tower. It was faint but deliberate, and it made my skin crawl. I stood up, flashlight beams swinging wildly. "We need to move," I said, my voice barely steady. Marcus nodded, for once not arguing. Lila was shaking, stuffing her camera into her bag. We grabbed what we could, water, a knife, a map, and huddled by the Jeep, hoping to hide in its shadow. I kept thinking about that time I locked myself out of my apartment in Richmond, stuck outside in the rain. This was worse. No keys, no way out, and something in the dark. The scrape came again, closer, maybe from the trail. I whispered for everyone to stay quiet, but my hands were trembling so bad I nearly dropped the flashlight. We decided to head for the trailhead, keys or no keys. Staying put felt like waiting for whatever was out there to come get us. The path to Route 33 was our best shot, even if it meant a 6-mile hike in the dark. I led the way, flashlight low, trying not to trip. Lila was right behind me, her breathing ragged, and Marcus brought up the rear, clutching a stick like it was a sword. The forest was pitch black, the kind of dark that swallows you whole. Every step felt like a gamble. I kept glancing back at the tower, its outline barely visible. That's when I saw it, a flicker of movement at the top, like someone was in the cab. My stomach twisted. Nobody should be up there. Halfway down the trail, Lila grabbed my arm hard. "Ezra, stop," she whispered. I froze, shining the light ahead. Nothing. But then I heard it, a faint hum, like before, but now it was words, garbled and low, like a radio stuck between stations. It was coming from all around us, not just the tower. Marcus swore under his breath, his tough guy act crumbling. I felt like I was in one of those horror movies where the characters make every dumb mistake, but I didn't know what else to do. Keep moving or hide. My brain was screaming to run, but my legs felt like lead. The hum stopped, and for a second, I thought we were okay. Then the ground shook, just once, like something heavy landed nearby. I swung the flashlight, catching a glimpse of something tall and thin darting between the trees. It was gone before I could focus, but it was real, too real. Lila stifled a scream, and Marcus was whispering, "It's the Wraith, it's gotta be." I wanted to tell him to shut up, but my mouth was dry. The air felt electric, like a storm was about to break, but the sky was clear. We crouched behind a boulder, hearts pounding, trying to stay invisible. I kept thinking about that ranger, Don Gaudenier, burned alive decades ago. Was this thing tied to him? The thought was disturbing, like we'd stumbled into something we weren't meant to see. The hum started again, louder, and now it was definitely words. Old, angry words I couldn't understand. They seemed to come from the ground itself, vibrating in my chest. Lila was crying quietly, clutching her bag like a lifeline. Marcus was gripping his stick so tight his knuckles were white. I whispered that we had to keep moving, but every step felt like walking into a trap. The trail was narrower now, trees crowding in, branches snagging my jacket. I kept the flashlight low, praying whatever was out there wouldn't see us. But then I heard it, a slow, deliberate crunch, like footsteps trailing us. Not fast, not rushed, just steady. That was the scariest part. It wasn't in a hurry. I turned, shining the light back. Nothing but trees. But the crunching didn't stop. It was closer now, maybe 20 feet behind. My mind raced, picturing every horror story I'd ever heard. Things that hunt you slow, things that don't need to rush because they know you can't escape. I grabbed Lila's hand, pulling her along, and Marcus stumbled after us. The trail was supposed to lead to the road, but it felt endless, like the forest was stretching itself to keep us trapped. The crunching stopped, and I thought maybe we'd lost it. Then Lila screamed, pointing at the trees. Her flashlight caught a figure, tall, pale, standing still, its head tilted like it was studying us. We ran, branches whipping our faces, the trail a blur. My lungs burned, but I didn't stop. The hum was everywhere now, loud and angry, like it was inside my head. I could hear Lila sobbing behind me, Marcus cursing, but we kept going. The figure didn't chase us. At least, I didn't think so. But it didn't need to. It was like the forest itself was against us, the air thick with that disturbing energy. I kept thinking about the Jeep, our only way out, sitting useless without the keys. We were so screwed. The trailhead was close, maybe a mile away, but it felt like we'd never make it. Something was wrong, really wrong, and it wasn't letting us go. My legs were screaming, but I kept running, Lila's hand clamped in mine, Marcus stumbling behind. The trail to Route 33 was a blur of roots and rocks, and that damn hum was still in my ears, like a chant from some forgotten time. The flashlight beam bounced wildly, catching glimpses of trees that seemed to lean closer, like they were alive. I could still see that pale figure in my mind, its tilted head burned into my brain. This wasn't just scary anymore. It was a full-on horror show, like we'd stumbled into a nightmare we couldn't outrun. The trailhead had to be close, but every step felt like we were circling back toward High Knob. My lungs burned, and I could hear Lila gasping, her camera bag slapping against her side. We hit a fork in the trail, and I froze. The map said straight to the road, but the left path looked wider, easier. Marcus, panting, snapped, "Go right. Ezra, don't be an idiot." I wanted to argue, but that crunching sound was back, slow, deliberate, maybe 50 feet behind. I picked straight, praying it was right. The hum grew louder, words twisting in my head, sounding like stay or mine. It was like the forest itself was talking, and it was pissed. I kept thinking about those Virginia legends Marcus rambled about, how the Wraith of the Knob claimed trespassers. Was that what this was? My heart was pounding so hard I thought it had burst. Lila tripped, her ankle twisting on a rock. She yelped, and I hauled her up, my arm around her waist. "Keep moving," I hissed, though I was terrified we'd lost our chance. Marcus was ahead now, his stick gone, running like his life depended on it. The crunching was closer, too close. I swung the flashlight back, and there it was, tall, pale, gliding between trees, its face a blank smear. My stomach lurched, like I'd seen something I wasn't meant to. Lila screamed, and we bolted, her limping but moving. The trail opened up, and I saw the glint of asphalt. Route 33. Hope flared, but that hum was deafening now, vibrating in my bones. We hit the road, pavement hard under my boots. No cars, no lights, just empty highway stretching into the dark. The Jeep was back at the trailhead lot, useless without keys. I looked back, expecting that thing to be right behind us, but the forest was still. Too still. Marcus was doubled over, catching his breath, muttering, "We're not out of this." Lila was shaking, her ankle swelling, but she clutched her camera like it was her lifeline. I scanned the road for headlights, praying for a trucker or ranger. Nothing. The air felt thick, like the forest was watching, waiting for us to make a wrong move. I remembered Theo, my ranger buddy, saying there was a gas station a few miles east. It was our only shot. We started walking, Lila leaning on me, her face pale. The hum faded, but I kept hearing those crunching steps in my head, like they were burned into my skull. Marcus was quiet now, his usual know-it-all vibe gone. I kept glancing back, half expecting that thing to step out of the trees. It was like being a kid again, scared of the dark. Only this was real, and it was disturbing as hell. The road curved, and I saw a faint glow, maybe the gas station. My heart lifted, but something told me we weren't safe yet. We trudged on, the glow getting closer. Lila was slowing, her ankle worse than she let on. I offered to carry her, but she shook her head, stubborn as ever. Marcus kept checking his phone, hoping for a signal, but we were still in a dead zone. Then I heard it, a low scrape, like before, coming from the woods beside the road. My flashlight caught nothing, but the air turned cold, like we'd walked into a freezer. I whispered for everyone to hurry, but Lila was struggling. I felt like we were in one of those horror movies where the monster lets you think you're free, then strikes. The gas station's neon sign flickered into view, a grimy, 24-hour joint. We were so close. The station was empty, just a bored clerk inside, flipping through a magazine. I banged on the door, and he let us in, looking confused. "You folks okay?" he asked, eyeing Lila's limp. I blurted out that we needed a phone. Our car was stuck, and something was after us. He raised an eyebrow, probably thinking we were drunk. I didn't care. We were alive, inside, safe, for now. Lila sank into a chair, and Marcus started pacing, muttering about the wraith. The clerk offered to call a tow truck, but I barely heard him. That scrape was back, faint, outside the glass door. I looked out, and my blood froze. A tall shadow stood across the road, motionless, watching. I told the clerk to lock the door, my voice shaking. He did, but he looked at me like I was nuts. I pulled Lila and Marcus behind the counter, out of sight. The shadow didn't move, but I could feel its eyes, or whatever it had, boring into us. The hum started again, low and angry, seeping through the walls. Lila whispered, "It's not done with us." I wanted to argue, but she was right. This thing, whatever it was, wasn't just tied to the tower, it was following us. The clerk was on the phone, talking to a tow guy, oblivious to the horror outside. I gripped the knife in my pocket, knowing it was useless against whatever was out there. The tow truck was an hour out, the clerk said. An hour felt like forever. We stayed low, watching the shadow. It didn't come closer, but it didn't leave either. My mind raced, trying to piece it together. Was this Don Godinier's ghost? Something older? All I knew was it wanted us, and we'd made a mistake coming to High Knob. The hum grew louder, words forming again, "Stay mine." I felt like I was losing it, like the forest had gotten inside my head. Lila was crying silently, Marcus was frozen, and I was out of ideas. The gas station's fluorescent lights flickered, and the shadow tilted its head, just like before. We weren't out of this yet. The gas station's lights buzzed, flickering like they were about to die. I was crouched behind the counter, Lila next to me, her ankle propped up on a crate. Marcus was by the window, peeking at that shadow across the road. It hadn't moved, but it didn't need to. Its presence was enough to keep us trapped in this horror. The clerk, oblivious, was munching on chips, telling us the tow truck was 45 minutes away. I wanted to scream at him to take this seriously, but what could I say? That a ghost from some Virginia myth was hunting us. My hands were sweaty, the knife in my pocket useless. The hum was constant now, a low drone that made my teeth ache, like it was burrowing into my skull. Lila grabbed my arm, her eyes wide. "My camera," she whispered, pulling it from her bag. "It's recording again." I stared at the screen, my heart sinking. Grainy footage showed the gas station's interior, but it wasn't us. It was empty, except for that tall, pale figure standing by the door, inside. I whipped around, expecting to see it, but there was nothing. Just the clerk, the chips, the buzzing lights. Lila's hands shook as she shut it off. "It's playing with us," she said, voice breaking. Marcus turned, his face pale. "We need to destroy it," he said, pointing at the camera. "It's tied to this thing." I hesitated. Her camera was her life, but the idea made a sick kind of sense. Marcus grabbed the camera before Lila could stop him, smashing it on the floor. The clerk yelled, "Hey, what the hell?" But Marcus didn't stop, stomping until the screen cracked. Lila screamed, lunging at him, but I held her back. The hum spiked, so loud it rattled the windows, and the shadow outside moved fast toward the door. I shouted for the clerk to lock it again, but he was frozen, staring outside. The shadow was at the glass now, its blank face pressed against it, smearing something dark. My stomach churned. This was worse than any horror I'd ever imagined, like we'd pissed off something ancient and unstoppable. I dragged Lila toward the back, looking for another exit. Marcus followed, muttering apologies, but Lila was sobbing, cursing him for destroying her camera. The clerk finally snapped out of it, pointing to a rear door by the stockroom. We ran, the hum chasing us, words clearer now. You took, you pay. My mind flashed to the tower, the alidade, the photos. Had we taken something we shouldn't have? The back door was locked, and the clerk fumbled with his keys, hands shaking. I glanced back, and the shadow was inside now, gliding past the counter, silent but fast. It was like every scary story I'd ever heard, only real and coming for us. We burst out the back into a gravel lot, the forest looming dark and close. The tow truck's headlights were visible down the road, maybe 10 minutes away. I thought we'd made it, but then I heard Lila gasp. Marcus was gone. I spun around, shining the flashlight, but he wasn't there. The hum was deafening, and I realized it was coming from Lila's bag. She hadn't let go of the broken camera's memory card. Drop it, I yelled, but she clutched it tighter, like it was all she had left. That was our mistake. The shadow appeared at the edge of the lot, taller now, its face a void. It moved toward us, and I swear it whispered my name. I grabbed Lila, pulling her toward the road, but she was slowing, her ankle giving out. The tow truck was closer, its engine rumbling, but the shadow was faster. It reached for Lila, and I swung my knife, slicing air. The hum turned into a scream, and Lila dropped the memory card, stumbling. I caught her, but the shadow was on us, cold air wrapping around like a noose. I pushed Lila toward the truck's headlights, shouting for her to run. She did, limping, screaming for help. I turned to face it, knife raised, but it was gone. So was the hum. The silence was worse, like the calm after a storm you know isn't over. The tow truck driver screeched to a stop, a grizzled guy who looked like he'd seen it all. Lila was crying, babbling about Marcus, the shadow, the camera. I climbed in, numb, scanning the dark for Marcus. Nothing. The driver didn't ask questions, just drove us to Harrisonburg. I kept expecting the hum to return, but it didn't. At the police station, we told them about Marcus, the tower, everything. They searched for days, but he was gone. No trace, no body. The Jeep was towed back, keys still missing. Lila never recovered her photos, and she hasn't spoken to me since, blaming me for dragging her out there. I'm back in Richmond now, but I don't sleep much. Every night, I hear that hum, faint, like it's waiting. I looked up Don Godinier. Turns out he didn't just die in a fire. He was blamed for starting it, trapped in the tower as punishment. Locals say his spirit guards High Knob, hating anyone who takes from it. Lila's photos, Marcus's obsession with the tower, maybe we took too much. The tragedy is Marcus paid for it, and I'm left wondering if that thing let us go, or if it's still out there, watching. I'll never go back to Shenandoah. Some mistakes you don't get to fix. I pass by Route 33 sometimes, and I swear I see a shadow in the trees, tall and pale, waiting. It's like it knows I'm not done paying. I'm Nora Hensley, 34 years old, from Norfolk, Virginia. City life's been my thing. Bustling streets, coffee shops, the hum of the waterfront. But last fall, I needed a break from the grind, so I planned a camping trip to George Washington National Forest, just outside Harrisonburg. I'd heard about Reddish Knob Fire Tower, a lonely steel structure with killer views over the Blue Ridge. My friend Cal, 30, a mechanic from Lynchburg, and his sister Faye, 27, a nurse from Staunton, tagged along. Cal's the laid-back type, always cracking jokes, while Faye's intense, always prepared for disaster. I packed my trusty pickup truck, and we headed out, chasing a weekend of peace. Little did I know, peace was the last thing we'd find. The drive from Norfolk was long, about 3 hours, with the Blue Ridge Mountains looming closer every mile. I was stoked, windows down, country music blaring. We stopped in Harrisonburg for burgers at a dive called Jack Brown's, where Cal flirted with the waitress and Faye rolled her eyes, checking her first aid kit for the 10th time. We grabbed supplies, food, lanterns, a cheap radio, and hit the forest road. The trailhead was off Route 257, a gravel lot with a faded sign for Reddish Knob. I parked the truck, feeling that buzz of adventure, like when you're a kid exploring somewhere new. The air smelled like pine and freedom. The hike to our campsite was a slog, 3 miles uphill with heavy packs. Cal kept up a stream of dumb jokes, like calling the tower Reddish Knob and the Sorcerer's Stone. Faye shushed him, focused on the trail like it might bite. We set up near the tower's base, a clearing with a fire ring and a view of the steel structure glinting in the sun. It was taller than I expected, maybe 60 feet, with a rickety staircase spiraling up. I joked about climbing it at night for a thrill, but Faye shot me a look, saying it was a death trap. Cal, of course, dared her to do it, and I laughed, feeling light for the first time in months. Camp went up fast. I pitched my tent while Cal struggled with his, cursing when the poles snapped. Faye had hers up in 10 minutes, all business. We built a fire, roasted marshmallows, and cracked open some sodas. The forest was alive, birds chirping, wind rustling. Cal started telling stories about Reddish Knob, saying locals called it cursed, tied to a fire in the 50s that killed a lookout named Amos Reed. They say his ghost haunts the tower, he said, wiggling his fingers. I laughed it off, but Faye went quiet, staring at the flames. The tower's shadow stretched long as the sun dipped, and I felt a chill that wasn't just the evening air. Night fell, and we huddled by the fire, swapping stories. I talked about my boring office job, Cal rambled about fixing cars, and Faye shared hospital horror tales, like the time she stitched up a guy who'd fought a bear and lost. The tower loomed above, its steel frame catching moonlight. I suggested a quick climb for photos, but Faye vetoed it, saying the stairs looked sketchy. Cal teased her for being a buzzkill, but I sided with her. Those steps didn't look safe. Still, I couldn't stop glancing at the tower, its silhouette sharp and unsettling, like it was watching us back. Morning broke with a heavy fog, the kind that makes everything feel too close. I woke up shivering, my sleeping bag damp. Cal was snoring, but Faye was already up, boiling water for coffee. She looked tense, checking her phone for a signal that wasn't there. We ate granola bars and planned a hike to the tower. The trail was short but steep, and my calves burned by the time we reached the base. The tower was rustier up close, paint peeling, with a locked gate at the stairs. Cal rattled it, joking about breaking in, but Faye snapped at him to stop. I peered up, the cab at the top barely visible in the fog. Something about it felt off, like a secret it didn't want to share. We didn't climb, just circled the base. Faye took some photos with her phone, muttering about the fog ruining her shots. Cal kept poking at the gate, saying he could pick the lock with a paperclip. I told him to chill, but I was curious too. The tower had a vibe, like an old house nobody lives in anymore. I remembered Cal's ghost story about Amos Reed, how he'd been trapped in the cab during the fire, screaming for help. It was probably just a tale, but it stuck with me. The fog thickened, and I swear I heard a creak from above, like someone walking in the cab. I brushed it off, but my gut twisted. Back at camp, we decided to stay another night. I wanted more time in the wild, away from Norfolk's noise. But as I unpacked my bag, I noticed my truck keys were missing. I tore through everything, heart racing. Faye helped, calm but thorough, while Cal just shrugged, saying I'd probably left them in the truck. We hiked back to the lot, but the keys weren't there. The truck sat useless, locked tight. No cell service, no way out. The fog was heavier now, swallowing the trees. I tried to stay cool, but a disturbing feeling crept in, like we'd tripped over something we shouldn't have. By dusk, the fog was so thick I could barely see the tower. We sat by the fire, tense, trying to plan. Cal suggested hiking to a ranger station, but Faye said it was too risky in this weather. I agreed, but the thought of being stuck here was scary. Faye kept checking her phone, zooming in on her tower photos. "There's something in this one," she said, showing me a blurry spot in the cab's window. It looked like nothing, but my skin prickled. Cal scoffed, but he was quieter than usual. The forest was silent, no birds, no wind, just that tower, looming in the fog, waiting. The fog was thicker now, like walking through a cloud, and I was freaking out about those missing truck keys. I tore through my pack again, dumping socks and granola bars onto the damp ground. Faye was methodical, checking the tent seams, while Cal just leaned against a tree, saying I'd probably drop them on the trail. His chill vibe was pissing me off, but I bit my tongue. We decided to retrace our steps to the tower, hoping to find them. The air felt heavy, like before a storm, but the sky was just gray fog. That disturbing vibe from last night was back, gnawing at me. I kept thinking about Amos Reed, the lookout Cal mentioned, and how his ghost supposedly lingered. Just a story, right? But my gut wasn't so sure. We hiked up to Reddish Knob, flashlights cutting through the mist. The forest was dead quiet. No birds, no breeze, just our boots crunching gravel. Faye led, her nurse instincts kicking in, scanning the ground like it was a patient. Cal trailed, humming some dumb tune to lighten the mood. I kept my eyes peeled, but my mind was on Faye's blurry photo. It looked like nothing, but it felt like something scary. Halfway up, Faye stopped, pointing at a tree. Carved into the bark was a symbol, like a crooked star. That wasn't here yesterday, she said, voice tight. Cal shrugged, saying it was probably kids, but I saw his hands shake. At the tower, the gate was still locked, the steel frame looming like a skeleton in the fog. I rattled the bars, desperate for a glint of my keys. Nothing. Cal climbed partway up the outer stairs, ignoring Faye's protests, and shone his flashlight into the cab. Empty, he called, but his voice wavered. I followed, peering up. The fog made the cab look hazy, like it was floating. I swear I saw something move inside. A quick flicker, gone in a blink. My heart skipped, but I didn't say anything. Faye was taking more photos, her hands unsteady. "This place is wrong," she muttered, zooming in on her phone. That horror vibe was thick now, like the tower was daring us to stay. We headed back to camp, keyless and tense. Faye showed us her latest photo, and my stomach dropped. That blurry spot in the cab, it was sharper now, shaped like a person, tall and thin, standing by the window. "It's just fog," I said, but my voice cracked. Cal, usually full of quips, went quiet, staring at the ground. We sat by the fire, trying to plan. Hiking out was our only option. Route 257 was a few miles away, but the fog made it risky. I remembered getting lost in Norfolk once, stuck in a storm, but this felt worse, like the forest was messing with us. Faye suggested waiting till morning, but Cal wanted to go now, saying the fog might hide us. I sided with Faye. Hiking blind seemed like a death wish. But as we argued, the radio we'd brought crackled to life. Static at first, then a voice, low, garbled, like someone talking underwater. "Leave now," it said, then cut out. We froze. Cal laughed nervously, saying it was a prank signal, but Faye's face was white. She turned the radio off, but it clicked back on, the same voice repeating, "Leave." My skin crawled. It was like those creepy stories you hear as a kid, only this was real, and it was disturbing. I grabbed the radio, yanking the batteries, but the silence that followed felt heavier than the voice. We agreed to stick together, no splitting up. Faye packed her med kit, Cal grabbed a knife, and I slung my backpack on, flashlight ready. The plan was to stay put till dawn, then hike out. But as we settled by the fire, I heard a new sound, a low whistle, sharp and deliberate, coming from the tower. It wasn't the wind. I'd heard whistles before, like on hikes in Norfolk, but this was different, like someone calling us. Faye gripped my arm, whispering, "That's not normal." Cal tried to joke, saying it was a lost hiker, but his voice was shaky. The whistle came again, closer, and I felt like we were being watched. I shone my flashlight toward the tower, but the fog swallowed the beam. The whistle stopped, replaced by a faint tapping, like fingers on metal. It was coming from the tower's base, maybe the gate. My heart was racing now, that scary feeling turning into full-blown panic. Faye whispered that we should pack up and move, fog or no fog. I nodded, but Cal hesitated, saying we were safer by the fire. I wanted to agree, but that tapping was relentless, like it was counting down. I kept thinking about Amos Reed, trapped in that tower, and wondered if we'd pissed something off by coming here. We started packing, moving fast. Faye's hands were shaking as she stuffed her tent, and Cal kept glancing at the tower, his knife out. The tapping grew louder, then stopped. For a second, I thought we were okay. Then Faye gasped, pointing at her phone. The screen showed a live feed. She'd left the camera app open. It was pointed at the clearing, and there, just beyond the firelight, was a figure. Tall, thin, motionless, its head tilted. My blood ran cold. It wasn't fog. It was real. We grabbed our gear, ready to bolt, but the fog seemed to tighten around us, like the forest didn't want us to leave. As we huddled, the radio crackled again, batteries still out. That voice came through, clearer now. "You shouldn't have come." My heart stopped. The figure in Faye's phone moved, stepping closer to the firelight. I couldn't see its face, but I felt its stare, like it was peeling me apart. We were trapped, no keys, no truck, and something out there was playing with us. The horror was real now, and I had no idea how we were getting out of this. I clutched my flashlight, heart hammering as we stood frozen by the fire, Faye's phone still showing that tall, tilted figure in the fog. It was gone from the screen now, but I could feel it out there, watching. The air was thick, like the forest was pressing in, and that whistle started again. Sharp, slow, closer. Cal swore, gripping his knife, while Faye whispered, "We need to go now." My legs felt like jelly, but she was right. This wasn't just a creepy vibe anymore. This was horror, straight out of those Virginia ghost stories Cal loved. The tapping from the tower was back, louder, like someone banging on the gate. I swung my light toward it, but the fog ate the beam. Something was very wrong, and we were sitting ducks. We grabbed our packs, moving fast, but the fog made it hard to see the trail. I led, Faye right behind, her breathing shaky. Cal kept looking back, muttering about Amos Reed's ghost. "Shut up," I snapped, but my voice was trembling. The whistle turned into a low moan, like wind through a broken window, but it wasn't natural. It came from all sides, circling us. I remembered a night in Norfolk when a storm knocked out power, leaving me in the dark, scared of every noise. This was worse, like the forest itself was alive and pissed. My flashlight caught a glint on the ground, my keys. I lunged for them, hope flaring, but the moan spiked, and I froze. Something was close. We sprinted toward the trailhead, my keys jangling in my pocket. The moan grew louder, words forming, old, guttural, like stay or mine. My skin crawled, that scary feeling now of full-blown panic. Faye tripped, her med kit spilling, bandages scattering. I pulled her up, but she was shaking, saying she saw something move in the fog. Cal swung his knife wildly, shouting, "Show yourself." Nothing answered, but the tapping followed, now from the trees, like it was tracking us. I kept thinking about those old lookout towers, how they were built to watch for danger. Now it felt like the danger was watching us. The trail twisted, and I thought we were close to Route 257, but the fog messed with my sense of direction. It was like the forest was shifting, leading us in circles. Faye's phone buzzed, and she gasped, showing me the screen. Another live feed, unprompted, showed our campsite, empty, except for that figure, now standing by our fire, holding something shiny. My keys. No, I had them, but the sight made my blood run cold. It was playing with us, like a cat with a mouse. This wasn't just disturbing, it was a nightmare, and we were trapped in it. I pushed Faye forward, yelling for Cal to keep up. We hit a clearing, and I saw the trailhead sign, barely visible. Hope surged, but then the moan became a scream, sharp and human-like, coming from behind. I spun, flashlight shaking, and caught a glimpse, tall, thin, moving fast through the fog. Its face was wrong, blank, but somehow angry. Cal yelled, swinging his knife, but it vanished. My heart was in my throat, like every horror movie chase scene I'd ever seen. Only this was real. Faye was crying, clutching her phone, and I realized she was still recording. "Turn it off," I shouted, but she shook her head, saying we needed proof. That was a mistake. The scream came again, closer, and the ground shook, like something heavy was charging. I grabbed Faye's arm, dragging her toward the lot where my truck sat. Cal was right behind, but he was slowing, his face pale. "It's after me," he whispered, like he knew something I didn't. I didn't stop to ask, just kept running. The fog parted, and there was the truck, a beacon in the dark. I fumbled the keys, dropping them in the gravel. As I bent to grab them, the scream stopped, replaced by silence, dead, heavy silence. I looked up, and the figure was there, at the edge of the lot, just standing, watching. I unlocked the truck, yelling for Faye and Cal to get in. Faye dove into the passenger seat, but Cal hesitated, staring at the figure. "Cal, move," I shouted, but he shook his head, like he was in a trance. The figure tilted its head, and the moan started again, low and hungry. I climbed into the driver's seat, starting the engine, but Cal was still outside, knife raised, muttering, "I see you, Amos." My stomach twisted. This wasn't just a ghost story anymore. It was a life-or-death horror show. I leaned out, screaming for him to get in, but he took a step toward the figure, like he was challenging it. The engine roared, and I hit the gas, ready to pull Cal in, but the figure moved, fast, too fast, gliding toward him. Faye screamed, banging on the window. I slammed on the brakes, jumping out, but the fog swallowed Cal. 1 second he was there, the next gone. The moan was everywhere now, vibrating in my chest, saying words I couldn't catch. I froze, torn between chasing Cal and saving Faye. The figure was nowhere, but I felt its eyes, like it was inside my head. I climbed back in, hands shaking, and locked the doors. Faye was sobbing, her phone still recording, showing nothing but fog. I floored it, tires spitting gravel, aiming for Route 257. The fog clung to the truck, like it was trying to hold us back. Faye kept whispering, "We left him," over and over. I wanted to argue, but guilt was choking me. That thing, whatever it was, had Cal, and I'd driven away. The moan followed, faint but steady, like it was riding with us. I kept thinking about Amos Reed, burned alive in that tower, and how the locals said he cursed anyone who came near. Had we triggered something by poking around? The road appeared, and I gunned it, but the horror wasn't over. Something was still out there, and it knew where we were. The truck's engine roared as I sped down Route 257, fog swirling in the headlights like it was alive. Faye was curled up in the passenger seat, sobbing, her phone clutched tight, still recording. My hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white, as I tried to shake the image of Cal vanishing into the fog. That moan was still there, faint but clinging, like it was stuck in my head. I kept glancing in the rear view, expecting that tall, blank-faced thing to be right behind us. This wasn't just scary anymore. It was a full-blown horror show, like we'd pissed off something ancient in George Washington National Forest. The road stretched dark and empty, and I prayed for a gas station, a ranger, anything to get us out of this nightmare. Faye's phone buzzed, and she gasped, showing me the screen. The live feed was back, showing the truck's interior, us, right now, but there was something else in the back seat. A shadow, tall and thin, just sitting there. I whipped around, heart pounding, but the seat was empty. "Turn it off," I yelled, swerving. She fumbled, dropping the phone, and the moan spiked, loud enough to rattle the windows. It was saying something, words like "you took" or "pay." My mind flashed to Cal's stories about Amos Reed, how he cursed anyone who disturbed Reddish Knob. Had we taken something? Face photos. My keys. I didn't know, but this was bad. I floored the gas, the truck lurching through the fog. Faye was shaking, muttering about Cal, blaming herself for not grabbing him. I wanted to comfort her, but my eyes were glued to the road. The moan was everywhere, like the forest was screaming at us. Then I saw it, a flicker in the fog, that figure gliding alongside the truck, keeping pace. Its blank face turned toward me, and my stomach dropped, like I was staring at death itself. I remembered a time in Norfolk when I got caught in a riptide, helpless against the current. This felt like that, but worse, something was pulling us back, and it wasn't letting go. A sign for a gas station flashed by, maybe a mile ahead. Hope sparked, but the figure was closer now, its long arms reaching out, brushing the truck's side. Faye screamed, and I swerved, nearly hitting a tree. "Hold on," I shouted, pushing the truck faster. The moan turned into a wail, sharp and furious, shaking the air. I kept thinking about those Virginia myths, how spirits like Amos Reed's never rest. Was this him? Something older? The gas station's neon glow appeared, a grimy oasis in the dark. I skidded into the lot, tires screeching, and slammed the truck into park. The figure was gone, but the wail lingered, low and angry. We stumbled out, Faye limping on her bad ankle from the trail. The station was open, a sleepy clerk wiping the counter. I banged on the door, yelling for help. He let us in, looking annoyed, like we were drunks causing trouble. "You okay?" he asked, eyeing Faye's tear-streaked face. I blurted out that we'd lost our friend, our truck was our only way out, and something was after us. He raised an eyebrow, but handed me a phone to call a ranger. Faye sank onto a stool, her phone dead now, the screen black. The whale was gone, but the air felt heavy, like the forest was waiting outside. I dialed Theo, my ranger contact, praying he'd answer. Theo picked up, groggy but alert when I mentioned Reddish Knob. "Stay put," he said. "I'm 10 minutes out." I thanked him, my voice shaking. The clerk offered us coffee, but I couldn't drink. My hands were trembling too much. Faye was quiet, staring at the floor, guilt eating her up. I wanted to say something, but what? We'd left Cal behind, and that horror was on me. The station's lights flickered, and I glanced outside. Nothing but fog and darkness. Then I heard it, a faint tap, like fingers on glass, from the back of the station. My heart stopped. The clerk didn't notice, but Faye did, her eyes wide. It was still out there. We moved to the back, near a stockroom, hoping to stay out of sight. The tapping grew louder, deliberate, like it was toying with us. I grabbed a tire iron from a shelf, feeling useless against whatever this was. Faye whispered, "It's not done." She was right. This thing wasn't tied to the tower anymore. It was following us, like a hunter who knows its prey is cornered. The clerk, oblivious, kept wiping the counter. I kept thinking about Cal, how he'd faced that thing, knife in hand. Had he known something we didn't? The tapping stopped, and for a second, I thought we were safe. Then the lights went out, plunging us into darkness. I swung the tire iron, blind, as Faye grabbed my arm. The clerk cursed, fumbling for a flashlight. The air turned cold, like a freezer, and that whale started again, right outside the door. I could feel it, whatever it was close, its presence suffocating. Theo's truck pulled into the lot, headlights cutting through the fog. I shouted for Faye to run, dragging her toward the door. The clerk followed, flashlight shaking. We burst outside, and Theo was there, a burly guy with a shotgun, looking confused but ready. The whale stopped, and the fog seemed to lift, just a little. We were alive, but I knew this wasn't over. Theo bundled us into his truck, asking what happened. I told him about Cal, the tower, the figure. He didn't laugh, just nodded, like he'd heard stories like this before. As we drove toward Harrisonburg, I kept looking back, expecting that thing to be in the road. It wasn't, but the air felt wrong, like it was waiting. Faye was silent, her hands empty, without her phone. I felt sick, knowing we'd left Cal to that thing. The horror of it all was sinking in, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd brought something with us, something that wasn't done with us yet. Theo's truck rattled toward Harrisonburg, the fog thinning but still clinging to the road. I sat in the back, Faye next to me, staring out the window like she could still see Cal out there. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, the tire iron still in my lap. That whale was gone, but its echo lived in my head, whispering, "You took, you pay." I kept replaying our mistake. Faye's photos, Cal's obsession with the tower, my stupid idea to camp at Reddish Knob. This wasn't just a scary story anymore. It was a tragedy, and Cal had paid the price. Theo drove in silence, his shotgun across his lap, like he knew something we didn't. The horror of what we'd seen clung to us like damp clothes. Faye pulled her phone from her pocket, even though it was dead. "I should have stopped him," she whispered, voice breaking. I wanted to argue, but guilt choked me. Cal had faced that thing, and I'd driven away. I remembered a time in Norfolk when I lost my dog in a storm, searching for hours, helpless. This was worse. Cal was gone, and we had no way to find him. Theo glanced back, saying, "Reddish Knob's got stories. Old ones." Amos Reed wasn't the only one who died there. My stomach twisted. Was this thing bigger than one ghost? Had we stumbled into something older, angrier? We reached Harrisonburg, pulling into a ranger station lit by harsh fluorescence. Theo called for backup, and I told the story again. Cal, the tower, the figure. The rangers listened, jotting notes, but their eyes said they didn't believe us. Faye showed them her dead phone, saying it had recorded everything, but it wouldn't turn on. I felt like we were in a horror movie where no one believes the survivors. Theo was different, though. He mentioned whispers about Reddish Knob, how locals avoided it, saying it took people who got too curious. I thought of Faye's photos, how they'd triggered something. That was our deadly mistake, capturing what we shouldn't have. The rangers organized a search for Cal, but I knew it was pointless. The forest had swallowed him, like it had others. They towed my truck back, keys still in my pocket, but I couldn't drive it yet. Faye and I stayed at a motel, neither of us sleeping. Every creak made me jump, expecting that whale to start again. Faye barely spoke, her eyes hollow. I looked up Amos Reed later, Turns out he didn't just die in a fire. He'd been accused of setting it, trapping himself in the tower as punishment. Locals said his spirit guarded the knob, hating anyone who took its secrets. Face photos, Cal's lock-picking stunt. Had we taken too much? Days passed, and the search found nothing. No Cal, no knife, no trace. Faye went back to Staunton, but she wasn't the same. She quit nursing, stopped taking photos. I drove back to Norfolk, but the city felt wrong, like I didn't belong anymore. Every night, I hear that wail, faint, like it's waiting. I keep my truck keys on me, always checking, like they might vanish again. Theo called once, saying they found carvings near the tower, crooked stars, like the one we saw. He didn't say it, but I knew he thought we'd woken something up. The tragedy wasn't just losing Cal, it was knowing we'd never be free of it. I avoid Route 257 now, but sometimes I drive by, and the forest feels alive, watching. Once, I swear I saw a shadow in the trees, tall and thin, head tilted. It didn't move, but I felt it. Angry, waiting. I don't camp anymore. I don't trust the woods. Whatever we met at Reddish Knob wasn't just a ghost. It was something older, something that doesn't forgive. We paid for our mistake, but not enough. It's still out there, and I'm scared it's still looking for me. I'm Gideon Voss, 41 years old, from Alexandria, Virginia. Life in the city's been a treadmill. Work, traffic, repeat, so I needed an escape. Last spring, I decided to go camping in Shenandoah National Forest, near Harrisonburg, a place I'd heard had killer trails and solitude. My old SUV was packed with gear, and I roped in my co-worker Celine, 36, a librarian from Fredericksburg with a knack for storytelling, and her cousin Theo, 29, a barista from Winchester who's always up for an adventure. Celine's got this calm, bookish vibe, but she's tough, while Theo's a bit of a wild card, always chasing a thrill. We aimed for Hawksbill Fire Tower, a rusty relic with a view that promised to reset my soul. I had no clue it'd turn into something else entirely. The drive from Alexandria was a breeze, about 2 hours on I-66, with spring blooming across the Blue Ridge. We stopped in Harrisonburg at a place called Bella Luna for pizza, where Theo charmed the server with his grin, and Celine read us a local legend about Hawksbill, something about a lookout named Clara Holt who vanished in the 60s. Spooky stuff, she said, half smiling. I shrugged it off, focused on the road ahead. We hit the trailhead off Skyline Drive, parking my SUV in a gravel lot. The air was fresh, like a deep breath after a long day. I felt alive, ready to ditch the city noise for a weekend of quiet. The hike to our campsite was a solid 2 miles, winding up to a clearing below Hawksbill. My pack was heavy, but the trail's beauty, wildflowers, distant peaks, made it worth it. Theo bounded ahead, joking about racing to the tower, while Celine lagged, sketching plants in a notebook. We set up camp in a flat spot with a clear view of the tower, its steel frame poking through the trees like an old sentinel. It was weathered, maybe 50 feet tall, with a staircase that looked sketchy but climbable. I teased Theo about sneaking up at night, but Celine warned us to stay grounded, saying old towers like that were bad news. Camp went up quick. I handled the tents, Theo gathered wood, and Celine organized our food like a librarian shelving books. We lit a fire, cooked some burgers, and cracked open a few beers. The forest hummed, crickets, wind, the works. Theo started spinning tales about Clara Holt, saying she was last seen in the tower during a storm, leaving only her journal behind. Locals say she's still up there, he said, eyes gleaming. I laughed, but Celine's face tightened, like she sensed something I didn't. The tower's silhouette loomed in the dusk, and a chill hit me, not just from the cooling air. It felt watchful. Night settled in, and we swapped stories by the fire. I talked about my boring IT job, Celine shared creepy folktales she'd read, and Theo bragged about his latest skateboarding wipeout. The tower kept pulling my eyes, its dark shape blending with the trees. Celine suggested a morning hike to check it out, but Theo wanted to climb it now, saying the view would be epic under the stars. I shut that down. Those stairs didn't look safe in the dark. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, like when you walk into a room and know someone's been there. Morning came with a light mist, the forest quiet except for a few birds. I woke up stiff, my sleeping bag damp from the ground. Celine was brewing coffee, her nose in a book, while Theo was already poking around, hyped for the tower. We ate oatmeal and packed light for the hike. The trail to Hawksbill was short but steep, my boots slipping on wet rocks. The tower appeared through the mist, its steel rungs rusty but intact. Theo rattled the locked gate, grinning, while Celine took photos, muttering about angles. I looked up at the cab, empty and dusty, but it gave me a weird vibe, like it was holding its breath. We didn't climb. The gate was padlocked, and I wasn't about to break in. Theo sulked, but Celine seemed relieved, saying old towers like this had bad energy. I nodded, feeling it too, though I couldn't explain why. The mist thickened, and I heard a faint creak from the cab, like someone shifting weight. Probably just the wind, right? But my gut twisted, thinking of Clara Holt's story. We headed back to camp, the forest quieter than before, like it was listening. I tried to shake it off, but that disturbing feeling was creeping in, like we'd stepped somewhere we didn't belong. Back at camp, I noticed my SUV keys weren't in my pocket. I tore through my pack, cursing, while Celine checked her stuff, calm but thorough. Theo, predictably, laughed, saying I'd probably left them in the truck. We hiked back to the lot, but no keys. The SUV sat locked, useless, with no cell service to call for help. The mist was heavier now, wrapping the trees like a shroud. I tried to stay cool, but that horror vibe was growing, like the forest was closing in. Celine mentioned a ranger station a few miles away, but Theo wanted to try the tower again, saying the keys might be up there. I wasn't so sure. Dusk fell, and the mist turned to fog, thick and cold. We sat by the fire, tense, debating our next move. Theo kept pushing to check the tower, but Celine said it was a bad idea, her voice sharp. I sided with her, but I couldn't stop glancing at Hawksbill's outline, barely visible through the fog. Something felt wrong, like we'd kicked a hornet's nest. Celine pulled out her phone, showing us a photo from the tower, a blurry spot in the cab's window, shaped like a person. "It's just mist," I said, but my heart wasn't in it. The forest was too quiet, and that scary feeling was sinking in deep. The fog was so thick I could barely see the fire, and I was losing it over those missing SUV keys. I turned my pack inside out, scattering socks and a half-eaten granola bar, but nothing. Celine was calm, checking the tent corners like a detective, while Theo lounged by the fire, saying I'd probably dropped them on the trail to Hawksbill. His smirk was getting old fast, but I kept my cool. We decided to hike back to the tower, hoping to spot the keys. The air felt wrong, heavy with that disturbing vibe, like the forest was holding a grudge. I couldn't shake Clara Holt's story, vanishing in that tower, leaving just a journal. Was it just a tale, or had we stumbled into something real? We grabbed flashlights and started up the trail, the fog swallowing every sound except our footsteps. Celine led, her eyes scanning the ground, while Theo trailed, whistling to keep things chill. It wasn't working. My mind kept circling back to Celine's blurry photo, that weird shape in the tower's cab. It looked like nothing, but it felt like something scary. Halfway up, Celine stopped, pointing at a rock. Scratched into it was a symbol, a jagged circle with lines like claws. "That's new," she whispered. Theo scoffed, saying it was just vandals, but his voice cracked. My stomach twisted. This wasn't right. At the tower, the locked gate gleamed wet in the fog. I shook it, desperate for a sign of my keys, but the metal was cold and unyielding. Theo climbed a few steps, shining his light into the cab. "Nothing up here," he called, but he sounded spooked. I followed, peering up. The cab was empty, just rusty walls and dust, but it felt alive, like it was watching. Celine snapped more photos, her hands shaky. "This place is off," she said, zooming in on her phone. That horror vibe was thick now, like the tower was daring us to stay longer. I wanted out, but we had no keys, no way back. We trudged back to camp, empty-handed and on edge. Celine showed us her latest photo, and my heart sank. The blurry shape in the cab was clearer now, a tall, thin figure, head tilted, standing by the window. "It's just a trick of the light," I said, but I didn't believe it. Theo went quiet, staring into the fire, his usual bravado gone. We sat, trying to plan. The ranger station was 5 miles away, but hiking through this fog felt like suicide. I remembered getting lost in Alexandria once, stuck in a downpour, but this was worse. like the forest was playing with us. Celine suggested waiting till morning, when the fog might lift, but Theo wanted to move now, saying the tower might give us answers. I wasn't so sure. Every instinct screamed to stay away. Then our radio crackled, even though it was off. Static hissed, then a voice, low, broken, like it was choking on dust. "Go back," it said, then died. We froze. Theo laughed nervously, saying it was a stray signal, but Celine's face was pale. She turned the radio off, but it clicked back on, whispering, "Go." My skin crawled, like when you hear a noise in your house at night. This was disturbing, and it wasn't stopping. We agreed to stick together, no matter what. Celine packed her notebook, Theo grabbed a hatchet from his bag, and I held my flashlight like a club. The plan was to wait till dawn, then hike out. But then we heard it, a low hum, not the radio, coming from the tower. It was faint, like a distant chant, but it made my teeth ache. Theo's eyes widened. "That's not normal," he said, gripping his hatchet. Celine nodded, her hands trembling as she checked her phone again. The hum grew, weaving through the fog, and I felt like we were being called back to Hawksbill, like it wanted us there. I shone my flashlight toward the tower, but the fog ate the light. The hum turned into a rhythm, like footsteps, slow and deliberate, circling our camp. Celine whispered, "We're not alone." I wanted to argue, but my gut knew she was right. I kept thinking about Clara Holt, vanishing in that tower, and how the locals said she never left. Had we stirred something up? The hum stopped, and for a moment, I thought it was over. Then Celine's phone lit up, showing a new photo, taken just now, without her touching it. It was the clearing, our tents, and a figure standing just outside the firelight, tall and still. We backed toward the fire, flashlights sweeping the fog. The figure wasn't there, but the air felt charged, like a storm was brewing. Theo swung his hatchet, yelling into the dark, "Come on, then." Nothing answered, but the hum started again, closer, from the trees. Celine's phone buzzed, another photo loading, a close-up of the figure, its face blank, eyes like voids. My heart stopped. This wasn't just a ghost story, it was real, and it was hunting us. We grabbed our gear, ready to run, but the fog tightened, like it was holding us in place. As we packed, the hum grew louder, words forming, old, angry, like "stay" or "hours." I felt like I was in a nightmare, the kind where you can't move. Celine dropped her phone, the screen cracking, but it kept showing that figure, now closer, standing by our fire. Theo was shaking, his hatchet useless. I grabbed their arms, pulling them toward the trail, but the hum was everywhere, vibrating in my chest. We were trapped, no keys, no SUV, and something out there knew exactly where we were. The horror was closing in, and I had no idea how we'd get out. My flashlight shook in my hand as we stood by the fire, the hum pulsing through the fog like a heartbeat. Celine's phone was still on the ground, its cracked screen glowing with that image of the tall, blank-faced figure, closer now, just beyond our tents. Theo gripped his hatchet, his usual bravado gone, eyes darting into the dark. Celine whispered, "We can't stay here," her voice barely holding together. That hum wasn't just sound. It was alive, saying things like "stay" or "hours," and it made my skin crawl. This wasn't just a scary story about Clara Holt anymore. It was a full-on horror show, and we were the main act. The fog seemed to pulse with the hum, like the forest itself was turning against us. We grabbed what we could, packs, water, Theo's hatchet, and bolted for the trailhead. The fog was so thick I could barely see Celine in front of me. Her flashlight beamed a faint glow. Theo was behind, muttering curses, his hatchet swinging wildly. The hum followed, louder now, weaving through the trees like it was guiding us, or hurting us. I kept thinking about that time in Alexandria when I got stuck in a power outage, hearing noises in the dark, but this was worse. This was deliberate, like something wanted us lost. My SUV keys were in my pocket. I checked 10 times, but that didn't feel like enough to escape whatever was out there. Halfway down the trail, Celine tripped, her ankle twisting on a root. She hissed in pain, and I helped her up, her flashlight rolling into the brush. The hum spiked, words clearer now. "You took, you stay." My heart pounded, thinking of Clara Holt's journal, how she'd written about eyes in the fog before she vanished. Had we taken something by coming here? Celine's photos? Theo grabbed her flashlight, but when he shone it back, something moved, tall, thin, gliding between trees. Its face was a blank void, just like in the photo. I froze, my blood cold, like I'd seen something I wasn't meant to. We ran, Celine limping, me half dragging her. The trailhead was close, maybe a mile, but the fog made it feel endless. Theo shouted, "It's behind us," and I glanced back. The figure was there, not running, just gliding, always the same distance away. It was like a nightmare where you can't outrun the monster. The hum was deafening, vibrating in my chest, and I swear it said my name, Gideon. My legs burned, but I kept going, pulling Celine along. She was sobbing, saying, "We shouldn't have come." I wanted to agree, but all I could think was that this horror was real, and it wasn't letting us go. We hit a clearing, the trailhead sign barely visible through the fog. My SUV was there, a shadowy bulk in the lot. I fumbled for the keys, hands shaking, while Theo swung his hatchet at nothing, yelling into the dark. The hum turned into a wail, sharp and angry, like a warning. Celine's phone, still in her hand, lit up again, showing a live feed of the clearing. Us, running, and that figure, now standing by the SUV, head tilted. I screamed for her to turn it off, but she was frozen, staring at the screen. That was a mistake, keeping that damn phone on, like it was feeding whatever this was. I unlocked the SUV, shoving Celine toward the passenger door. Theo was still in the clearing, hatchet raised, shouting, "Come on, you bastard." I yelled for him to get in, but he didn't move, eyes locked on something in the fog. The figure was closer now, its blank face inches from the SUV's hood. My heart stopped. It wasn't just a shadow. It was solid, real, and wrong. The wail spiked, words twisting. "You took, you pay." I climbed into the driver's seat, starting the engine, but Theo was still out there, like he was daring it. I leaned out, screaming his name, but the fog was swallowing him. The engine roared, and I hit the gas, ready to grab Theo, but the figure moved, fast, too fast, gliding toward him. Celine screamed, banging on the window. I slammed on the brakes, jumping out, but Theo was gone, the fog closing like a curtain. The wail was everywhere, saying my name, Celine's, over and over. I climbed back in, hands shaking, and locked the doors. Celine was crying, her phone still showing that figure, now standing where Theo had been. I floored it, tires screeching, aiming for Skyline Drive. The wail followed, faint but relentless, like it was inside the SUV with us. The road appeared, and I gunned it, the fog thinning just enough to see. Celine was sobbing, saying, "We left him, Gideon." Guilt hit me like a punch, but I couldn't stop. That thing was still out there, and I felt its eyes, like it was riding with us. I kept thinking about Clara Holt, how she'd vanished without a trace, and those local stories about Hawksbill taking what it wanted. Had we triggered it by poking around? The wail faded, but the air felt heavy, like the forest wasn't done. I saw a sign for a ranger station, maybe 3 miles away. It was our only shot, but I wasn't sure we'd make it. As we sped through the fog, Celine's phone buzzed, even though it was cracked and dying. The screen flickered, showing the SUV's interior. Us, driving, and something in the back seat, tall and still. I didn't look back, too scared to see it. The wail started again, low and hungry, and I knew we weren't free. This thing, whatever it was, wasn't just tied to the tower, it was with us, and it was angry. The ranger station's lights flickered ahead, a faint hope, but my gut screamed that we'd made a mistake coming to Hawksbill, and we were about to pay for it. The SUV's tires screeched as I floored it down Skyline Drive, the fog swirling like it was trying to drag us back. Celine was hunched in the passenger seat, her cracked phone still glowing with that image of the figure in the back seat. I didn't dare look behind me, my hands locked on the wheel, heart pounding like a drum. The wail was fainter now, but it was still there, whispering "You took, you pay" in my head. This wasn't just a scary moment. It was pure horror, like we'd woken something ancient in Shenandoah National Forest. Theo was gone, swallowed by the fog, and I couldn't shake the guilt of leaving him. The ranger station was close, its lights a dim beacon, but I felt like we were racing against something that didn't need to run to catch us. Celine's phone buzzed again, the screen flickering. "Gideon, it's still on," she whispered, voice breaking. The feed showed us driving, but now the figure was clearer, tall, blank-faced, leaning forward from the back seat. My stomach lurched, like I'd swallowed ice. "Throw it out," I yelled, swerving. She hesitated, then rolled down the window and tossed the phone into the dark. The whale spiked, a furious scream that shook the SUV like we'd pissed it off more. I kept thinking about Clara Holt's journal, how she wrote about eyes in the fog before she vanished. Had we taken something by snapping photos, poking around Hawksbill? The road curved, and the ranger station's lights grew brighter, but I wasn't sure we'd make it. I pushed the SUV faster, the engine groaning. The whale was everywhere, words twisting. You took, you owe. Celine was sobbing, clutching her bag, muttering about Theo. I wanted to say something, but my throat was tight, like the forest was choking me. The figure hadn't followed, but I felt it, like a shadow stitched to us. I remembered a night in Alexandria when I got stuck in a blackout, hearing noises I couldn't explain. This was worse. Something was hunting us, and it knew our names. The ranger station appeared, a small building with a single floodlight. I skidded into the lot, tires spitting gravel, and killed the engine, praying we were safe. We stumbled out, Celine limping from her twisted ankle. The station door was locked, but a ranger, big guy named Paul, opened it, looking confused. You folks okay? He asked, eyeing our panicked faces. I blurted out everything. Theo, the tower, the figure, the whale. He didn't laugh, just nodded, like he'd heard stories like this before. Celine was shaking, saying we'd left Theo behind, and I felt like garbage for it. Paul let us in, offering coffee, but I couldn't drink. My hands were trembling too much. The whale was gone, but the air felt heavy, like the forest was watching through the windows. Then I heard it, a faint scratch, like nails on glass, from the back of the station. Paul grabbed a flashlight, saying it was probably a branch. I didn't buy it. Celine gripped my arm, whispering, "It followed us." I wanted to argue, but that disturbing vibe was back, stronger now. We moved to a corner, away from the windows, while Paul checked outside. The scratch came again, louder, deliberate, like it was circling the building. My mind raced. Clara Holt's story, the jagged circle we saw, the photos. Had we taken something sacred from Hawksbill? The lights flickered, and Celine gasped, pointing at the window. A shadow stood outside, tall and still, head tilted. My blood ran cold. It wasn't done with us. Paul came back, saying he saw nothing, but his face was pale. He radioed for backup, saying we'd stay put till morning. The scratching stopped, but the silence was worse, like the calm before a storm. I kept my keys in my hand, checking them obsessively, like they'd vanish again. Celine was quiet, guilt eating her up. I felt it too. Theo had been my idea on my trip. The horror of losing him was sinking in, like a weight I couldn't shake. The shadow didn't move, but I felt it stare, like it was waiting for us to slip up. Paul offered to drive us to Harrisonburg, but I wasn't sure anywhere was safe. We huddled in the station, the floodlight outside flickering. The shadow was still there, just beyond the light, motionless but heavy, like it owned the night. Celine whispered, "We shouldn't have taken those photos." I nodded, thinking of Clara Holt's journal, how she'd written about taking from the tower. The whale started again, low and angry, seeping through the walls. Paul didn't hear it, but his radio crackled, spitting static and a voice. "You owe." My heart stopped. This thing wasn't just at Hawksbill. It was with us, and it was pissed. I gripped my keys, praying Paul's truck could get us out before it got closer. Paul's backup was an hour out, he said, but that felt like forever. The whale grew louder, words clearer. "Pay now." I felt like I was in a nightmare, trapped with no way out. Celine was shaking, her eyes on the window, where the shadow tilted its head, like it was studying us. I grabbed a chair, ready to swing, but what good was that against something like this? The lights flickered again, and Paul's radio went dead. The air turned cold, like a freezer, and I knew we were running out of time. The shadow moved, gliding closer to the glass, and I felt like we were staring down death itself. We backed toward the door, Paul leading with his flashlight. The whale was deafening, shaking the walls, and the shadow was at the window now, its blank face pressed against it. Celine screamed, and I pulled her toward Paul's truck outside. He unlocked it, yelling for us to move. We dove in, the engine roaring to life, and Paul floored it, tires screeching. The shadow didn't chase, but I felt it watching, like it knew we couldn't run forever. The whale faded as we hit the road, but my gut screamed we weren't free. This thing was tied to us now, and it wasn't letting go. Paul's truck sped toward Harrisonburg, the fog thinning but still clinging to the road. I sat in the back, Celine next to me, her face pale and eyes hollow. The whale was gone, but its echo lived in my head, whispering, "You owe," like a curse. I kept replaying our mistake, Celine's photos, Theo's obsession with the tower, my dumb idea to camp at Hawksbill. This wasn't just a scary story, it was a tragedy, and Theo had paid for it. Paul drove in silence, his knuckles tight on the wheel, like he knew more than he was saying. The horror of what we'd faced was sinking in, and I felt like we'd brought something with us, something that wasn't done. Celine clutched her bag, whispering, "I should have stopped him." I wanted to argue, but guilt was choking me. Theo had faced that thing, hatchet raised, and I'd driven away. I remembered a time in Alexandria when I lost my keys in a storm, feeling helpless. This was worse. Theo was gone, and we had no way to find him. Paul broke the silence, saying, "Hawksbill's got a reputation. Clara Holt wasn't the only one who disappeared there." My stomach twisted. Was this thing older than one ghost? Had we stumbled into something ancient, tied to that jagged circle we saw? We reached Harrisonburg, pulling into a police station lit by harsh lights. Paul called for a search team, and I told the cops everything. The tower, the figure, Theo's disappearance. They took notes, but their eyes said they thought we were nuts. Celine tried to show her phone, but it was dead, the screen cracked beyond repair. I felt like we were in a horror movie where the survivors are dismissed, left to carry the truth alone. Paul was different, though. He mentioned old stories about Hawksbill, how locals avoided it, saying it claimed those who took from it. Celine's photos, Theo's poking around. Had we taken something we shouldn't have? The cops organized a search for Theo, but I knew it was hopeless. The forest had taken him, like it had Clara Holt decades ago. They towed my SUV back, keys still in my pocket, but I couldn't drive it yet. Celine and I stayed in a motel, neither of us sleeping. Every noise made me jump, expecting that whale to return. Celine barely spoke, her spark gone. I looked up Clara Holt later. Her journal was real, found in the tower, full of rants about eyes and debts. Locals said she'd angered something by writing about the tower's secrets. Our mistake was poking around, capturing what wasn't ours to take. Days passed, and the search found nothing. No Theo, no hatchet, no trace. Celine went back to Fredericksburg, but she quit her job, stopped telling stories. I returned to Alexandria, but the city felt wrong, like I was out of place. Every night, I hear that wail, faint but there, like it's waiting. I keep my keys on a chain around my neck, checking them constantly. Paul called once, saying they found more jagged circles carved near the tower, fresh ones. He didn't say it, but I knew he thought we'd woken something up. The tragedy wasn't just losing Theo, it was knowing we'd never escape what we'd stirred. I avoid Skyline Drive now, but sometimes I pass it, and the forest feels alive, watching. Once, I saw a shadow in the trees, tall and thin, head tilted. It didn't move, but I felt it stare, angry and patient. I don't camp anymore. I don't trust the woods. Whatever we met at Hawksbill wasn't just a ghost. It was something older, something that demands payment. We paid with Theo, but it's not enough. It's still out there, and I'm terrified it's still looking for me. I'm Lena Warwick, 28 years old, from Virginia Beach, Virginia. The coastal life's my usual scene: sand, surf, and salty air, but last summer, I needed a change. I'd been feeling stuck, so I planned a camping trip to George Washington National Forest near Harrisonburg, chasing some quiet in the mountains. My beat-up SUV was loaded with gear, and I convinced my friend Jasper, 31, a carpenter from Richmond, and his girlfriend Mara, 26, an artist from Lynchburg, to come along. Jasper's a chill guy, always fixing things, while Mara's got this dreamy vibe, sketching everything she sees. We aimed for Shenandoah Mountain Fire Tower, a weathered steel lookout with a view I'd heard was unreal. I didn't know it'd turn into something straight out of a nightmare. The drive from Virginia Beach was long, nearly 4 hours, but the Blue Ridge Mountains made it worth it, all green and rolling. We stopped in Harrisonburg at a diner called the Little Grill, where Jasper wolfed down pancakes and Mara doodled on a napkin, already planning sketches of the tower. We grabbed supplies, food, a lantern, a first aid kit, and hit the trailhead off Route 33. I parked my SUV in a dusty lot, the air crisp and full of pine. It felt like a fresh start, like shedding a heavy coat. The trail to the campsite was marked with a faded sign for Shenandoah Mountain, and I was buzzing, ready for a weekend away from the beach's noise. The hike was a steep 2 miles, my pack digging into my shoulders. Jasper led, joking about building a cabin out here, while Mara lagged, stopping to sketch wildflowers. We found a clearing near the tower's base, perfect for our tents, with the steel structure looming above, its rungs rusty but sturdy. It looked old, like it had stories to tell, maybe 40 feet tall with a small cab at the top. I teased Mara about climbing it for a sunset sketch, but she shook her head, saying it gave her a bad feeling. Jasper laughed, calling her a city girl, but I noticed him eyeing the tower too, like it was more than just metal. We set up camp fast. I hammered tent stakes while Jasper got the fire going, nearly burning his fingers. Mara organized our food, sketching the clearing as the sun dipped. We cooked hot dogs, the fire crackling, and I cracked open a soda, feeling the stress of Virginia Beach melt away. Jasper started telling stories about the tower, saying locals called it haunted, tied to a lookout named Virgil Kane who disappeared in the 70s after a forest fire. They say he's still up there, guarding the place, he said, grinning. I rolled my eyes, but Mara went quiet, her pencil pausing. The tower's shadow stretched across the clearing, and a chill hit me, not just from the night air. Night fell, and we huddled by the fire, swapping stories. I talked about my dead-end retail job, Jasper rambled about woodworking, and Mara shared how she once painted a mural in Lynchburg that got her in trouble with the mayor. The tower kept catching my eye, its silhouette sharp against the stars. Jasper suggested a night climb for kicks, but I shut it down. Those rungs looked sketchy even in daylight. Mara agreed, saying old towers like that felt wrong. I laughed it off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching, like when you're alone at the beach and feel eyes on you. Morning came with a heavy dew, my sleeping bag damp. Jasper was up, brewing coffee on a camp stove, while Mara was sketching the tower from a distance, her face tense. We ate granola bars and planned to hike to the tower for a closer look. The trail was short but rocky, my boots slipping on loose stones. The tower loomed bigger up close, its steel frame weathered, the cab's windows dusty and dark. Jasper rattled the locked gate, joking about breaking in, but Mara snapped at him to stop. I peered up, the cab empty but heavy with that disturbing vibe, like it was holding secrets. We didn't climb. The gate was solid, and I wasn't about to risk it. Mara took photos with her phone, muttering about bad light, while Jasper kept poking around, saying he could jimmy the lock. I told him to chill, but I was curious too. The tower felt off, like an abandoned house you don't want to enter. I thought of Virgil Kane, disappearing after that fire, and how locals said he never left. Just a story, but it stuck with me. The air was still, no birds, just quiet. We headed back to camp, but I kept glancing back, like the tower was calling me. Back at the clearing, I noticed my SUV keys were gone. I tore through my pack, heart racing, while Jasper checked the tent and Mara looked under rocks, her sketchpad forgotten. No luck. We hiked to the lot, but the keys weren't in the SUV either, locked tight with no cell service to call for help. The forest felt different now, too quiet, like it was waiting. I tried to stay calm, but that scary feeling was creeping in, like we'd tripped over something we shouldn't have. Jasper suggested checking the tower again, but Mara's eyes said no way. I wasn't sure what to do, but something felt wrong, really wrong. Dusk hit, and the forest went dead silent. No crickets, no wind. We sat by the fire, tense, debating our next move. Jasper wanted to hike to a ranger station, but Mara said it was too dark, too risky. I sided with her, but being stuck here was freaking me out. Mara showed us a photo from the tower, a blurry shape in the cab's window, like someone standing there. It's just dirt, I said, but my voice shook. Jasper went quiet, staring at the fire. The tower loomed in the dark, its outline barely visible, but it felt like it was staring back, and that horror vibe was growing, like we'd walked into something we couldn't walk out of. The fire was dying, and I was freaking out about those missing SUV keys, tearing through my pack like a maniac. Jasper was on his knees, checking under logs, while Mara clutched her sketchpad, muttering about checking the trail. Her voice was shaky, and I could tell she was spooked. We decided to hike back to Shenandoah Mountain Fire Tower, hoping the keys had fallen there. The air was thick, like the forest was holding its breath, and that disturbing vibe was creeping in stronger. I kept thinking about Virgil Kane, the lookout who vanished, and how Jasper's story felt less like a joke now. Something about this place was off, and my gut was screaming we'd stumbled into trouble. We grabbed flashlights and started up the trail, the darkness swallowing everything but our beams. Jasper led, his carpenter hands steady, while Mara stayed close, sketching nothing now, just gripping her phone. The forest was too quiet. No owls, no rustling, just our boots on dirt. My mind kept drifting to Mara's photo, that blurry shape in the tower's cap. It was probably nothing, but it felt scary, like catching a stranger's stare. Halfway up, Jasper stopped, pointing at a tree. Carved into the bark was a symbol, a twisted spiral, fresh and deep. "That wasn't here yesterday," he said, voice low. Mara nodded, her eyes wide. My stomach nodded. This wasn't normal. At the tower, the gate was still locked, the steel frame looming like a warning. I shook it, praying for a glint of my keys, but saw nothing. Mara shone her flashlight up, the cab's windows dark and empty, but it felt heavy, like someone was up there. "This place is wrong," she whispered, snapping a photo. I wanted to tell her to stop, but I was too focused on the ground. Jasper climbed a few rungs, peering into the cab. "Empty," he called, but his tone was off, like he didn't believe it. That horror vibe was thick now, like the tower was daring us to stay. I felt like we were being watched, and it wasn't friendly. We headed back to camp, keyless and on edge. Mara showed us her new photo, and my heart sank. The blurry shape was sharper, a tall figure, head tilted, standing in the cab. "It's just a shadow," I said, but my voice cracked. Jasper went quiet, staring at the fire, his usual confidence gone. We sat, trying to plan. Hiking to Route 33 was our best bet, but it was a 4-mile trek in the dark. I remembered getting locked out of my apartment in Virginia Beach, stuck in the rain, but this was worse, like the forest was conspiring against us. Jasper suggested checking the tower one more time, but Mara shook her head, scared. I agreed with Mara. Going back felt like a trap, but as we debated, our lantern flickered, even though it was fully fueled. It dimmed, then flared, casting weird shadows. Then we heard it, a low hum, like a distant chant, coming from the tower. It wasn't the wind, it was deliberate, like a voice. Jasper grabbed his knife, saying it was probably an animal, but his hands were shaking. Mara's phone lit up, showing another photo she hadn't taken, of our campsite, empty except for that figure, standing by our tents. My skin crawled. This was disturbing, like something out of a ghost story, but it was real. We decided to stick together, no splitting up. Jasper packed his tools, Mara stuffed her sketch pad, and I grabbed the lantern, its light barely cutting the dark. The plan was to wait till dawn, then hike out. But the hum grew louder, weaving through the trees, and I swear it said stay. Mara whispered. "That's not normal," her voice trembling. I nodded, thinking of Virgil Kane, how he'd vanished after that fire. Had we pissed something off by coming here? The hum stopped, and for a second, I thought we were okay. Then a new sound started, a slow scrape, like nails on metal, from the tower's direction. I swung the lantern, but the light barely reached the trees. The scrape came again, closer, like it was circling us. Jasper gripped his knife, yelling, "Who's there?" Nothing answered, but the air felt charged, like a storm was coming. Mara's phone buzzed, another unprompted photo loading. A close-up of the figure, its face blank, eyes like holes. My heart stopped. This wasn't just a creepy vibe. It was a nightmare, and we were in it. We huddled by the fire, trying to stay calm, but the scrape kept coming, steady and deliberate, like it was counting down. Jasper suggested we move now, fog or no fog, but I wasn't sure. The scrape was louder, maybe from the trail, and I felt like we were being hunted. I remembered a time in Virginia Beach when I got stuck in a storm, feeling watched, but this was worse. Something was out there, and it knew we were here. Mara's phone kept buzzing, showing the same figure, now closer, standing just outside the firelight. I told her to turn it off, but she was frozen, staring at the screen. The hum started again, words forming. "You took, you stay." We grabbed our gear, ready to run, but the forest felt like it was closing in. As we packed, the lantern flickered out, plunging us into darkness. The scrape was right behind us now, maybe 10 feet away. I fumbled for my flashlight, heart racing, and shone it into the trees. Nothing. But the hum was deafening, like it was inside my head, saying my name. Jasper was shaking, his knife useless, and Mara was crying, clutching her phone. We were trapped, no keys, no SUV, and something out there was playing with us. The horror was real, and I had no idea how we'd get out of this alive. My flashlight beam shook as we stood by the dying fire, the scrape echoing in the dark like nails clawing metal. Mara's phone was on the ground, its cracked screen glowing with that image of the tall, blank-faced figure, now just feet from our tents. Jasper gripped his knife, his usual calm gone, eyes scanning the trees. Mara whispered, "We have to leave," her voice barely holding together. The hum was louder, pulsing like a heartbeat, weaving words. "You took, you stay." This wasn't just a scary tale about Virgil Caine anymore. It was a full-blown horror show, and we were trapped in it. The forest felt alive, the air thick with that disturbing vibe, like it was closing in on us. We grabbed our gear, packs, water, Jasper's knife, and bolted for the trailhead. The darkness was suffocating, our flashlights barely cutting through it. Jasper led, his knife out, while Mara clung to my arm, her breathing ragged. The hum followed, circling us, saying my name, Lena. My heart pounded, thinking of Virgil Caine, vanishing after that 70s fire. Had we stirred something by poking around Shenandoah Mountain? The scrape came again, closer, like it was trailing us. I remembered a night in Virginia Beach, hearing footsteps outside my apartment. But this was worse. Something was hunting us, and it wasn't human. Halfway down the trail, Mara stumbled, her sketchpad falling into the dirt. I pulled her up, but she was shaking, saying she saw something move in the trees. Jasper swung his flashlight, catching a glimpse, tall, thin, gliding, its face a blank void. My stomach dropped, like I'd seen something forbidden. We ran, Mara limping, me dragging her along. The trailhead was close, but the hum turned into a wail, sharp and angry, vibrating in my chest. I kept thinking about those Virginia myths Jasper told, how the tower's spirit claimed intruders. Was this Virgil's ghost? Something older? The horror was real, and it was gaining on us. We hit a clearing, the trailhead sign barely visible in the dark. My SUV was there, a shadowy lifeline in the lot. I fumbled for the keys, hands trembling, while Jasper shouted, "Hurry, Lena!" The wail was deafening, words clearer. "You took, you pay." Mara's phone lit up again, showing a live feed of the clearing. Us, running, and that figure, now by the SUV, head tilted. I yelled for her to drop it, but she clutched it, saying we needed proof. That was a mistake, keeping that phone, like it was feeding the thing. My fingers found the keys, and I unlocked the SUV, shoving Mara toward the passenger door. Jasper was still in the clearing, knife raised, yelling into the dark, "Come on!" Then, I screamed for him to get in, but he didn't move, eyes locked on something I couldn't see. The figure was closer, gliding toward him, its blank face like a hole in reality. My heart stopped. It wasn't just a shadow, it was solid, wrong. The wail spiked, saying Jasper's name over and over. I climbed into the driver's seat, starting the engine, but Jasper stayed put, like he was challenging it. I leaned out, begging him to move, but the figure was on him, fast, too fast, its long arms reaching. The engine roared, and I hit the gas, ready to grab Jasper, but the darkness swallowed him. 1 second he was there, the next gone. Mara screamed, banging on the window, her phone still showing that figure, now standing where Jasper had been. I floored it, tires screeching, aiming for Route 33. The wail followed, faint but relentless, like it was inside the SUV. Mara was sobbing, saying, "We left him, Lena." Guilt hit me like a wave, but I couldn't stop. That thing was still out there, and I felt it stare, like it was riding with us. The road appeared, and I gunned it, but the horror wasn't over. I saw a sign for a gas station, maybe 2 miles away. Hope flickered, but the wail kept going, low and hungry. Mara's phone buzzed, even though it was cracked, showing the SUV's interior. Us, driving, and something in the back seat, tall and still. I didn't look back, too scared to see it. The wail said my name again, and I felt like I was in a nightmare, trapped with no way out. Jasper was gone, and it was my fault for bringing us here. The gas station's lights glowed ahead, a faint chance at safety, but my gut screamed we'd made a mistake at that tower, and it was coming for us. The gas station was close, its neon sign cutting through the dark. I pushed the SUV harder, the engine straining. Mara was crying, her phone still glowing, the figure's blank face clearer now, leaning forward. I yelled for her to throw it out, but she was frozen, staring at the screen. The whale was everywhere, saying pay now. I kept thinking about Virgil Caine, how he'd vanished without a trace, and those stories about the tower taking what it wanted. Had we triggered it with Mara's photos? The station was right there, but I felt like we were running out of time, like the forest wasn't done with us yet. As we sped toward the lights, the whale grew louder, shaking the SUV. The figure on Mara's phone moved, its head tilting, like it was watching us. I felt its eyes, even though it had none, and I knew this thing wasn't just tied to the tower, it was with us, and it was angry. The gas station was our only shot, but the horror was closing in, and I wasn't sure we'd make it. My SUV roared down Route 33, the darkness clinging to us like a shroud, Mara's sobs filling the cab. The whale was fainter now, but it echoed in my head, hissing, "You took, you pay." I gripped the wheel, my knuckles white, trying to outrun the image of Jasper vanishing into the night. That tall, blank-faced figure was still out there. I felt it stare, like a hook in my gut. This wasn't just a scary moment. It was a horror show, straight out of those Virginia legends about Shenandoah Mountain. The gas station's neon glow was close, maybe a mile away, but every second felt like a gamble. Guilt choked me for leaving Jasper, but I had to get Mara out, even if it killed me. Mara's phone buzzed, its cracked screen flickering. "Lena, it's back," she whispered, voice trembling. The live feed showed us driving, but in the back seat was that figure, tall and still, its head tilted like it was listening. My heart stopped, like I'd plunged into icy water. "Throw it," I shouted, swerving. She hesitated, tears streaming, then chucked the phone out the window. The whale screamed, shaking the SUV, like we'd ripped something vital from it. I kept thinking about Virgil Caine, how he'd vanished after that fire, and those stories about the tower demanding payment. Had Mara's photos taken something we couldn't give back? The gas station's lights blazed ahead, a lifeline in the dark. I pushed the SUV harder, the engine whining. The whale was everywhere, words twisting. You stay." Mara clutched her sketchpad, muttering Jasper's name, her guilt mirroring mine. I wanted to say we'd go back for him, but my throat was tight, like the forest was squeezing us. The figure didn't appear, but I felt it, like a shadow glued to the SUV. I remembered a storm in Virginia Beach, trapped on a pier, feeling helpless. This was worse. Something was hunting us, and it knew our every move. The gas station lot was empty, a grimy beacon. I skidded to a stop, tires screeching, and killed the engine, praying we'd made it. We stumbled out, Mara limping, her face pale. The station door was open, a bored clerk mopping the floor. I banged on the counter, yelling for a phone. He looked annoyed, like we were drunks, but handed me a landline. "You okay?" he asked, eyeing Mara's tears. I blurted out that we'd lost our friend, something was after us, and we needed help. He shrugged, pointing to a chair. I dialed 911, my voice shaking, begging for a ranger. Mara sank onto the floor, her sketchpad open to a half-finished drawing of the tower. The whale was gone, but the air felt heavy, like the forest was waiting outside. Then I heard it, a faint tap, like fingers on glass, from the back door. I froze, my heart racing. Mara's eyes widened, whispering, "It's here." The clerk didn't notice, still mopping, but I grabbed a broom, feeling useless against whatever this was. The tap came again, slow and deliberate, like it was toying with us. I thought of Virgil Caine, how the locals said he guarded the tower, hating intruders. Had we stolen something by being there? The lights flickered, and Mara gasped, pointing at the window. A shadow stood outside, tall and thin, head tilted. My blood ran cold. It wasn't done. I yelled for the clerk to lock the doors, but he just stared, confused. The tapping grew louder, circling the building, like it was looking for a way in. The clerk finally locked the back door, muttering about raccoons, but I knew better. I called 911 again, saying we were in danger, but the line crackled, a low hum breaking through. "UO." My stomach twisted. This thing wasn't just at the tower, it was with us, in the wires, the air. Mara was shaking, sketching frantically, like it could keep her sane. I pulled her behind the counter, out of sight, while the shadow lingered outside, motionless but heavy, like it owned the night. The clerk offered to call a tow truck, thinking our SUV was the problem, but I barely heard him. The hum was back, low and angry, seeping through the walls, saying our names. A ranger's truck pulled into the lot, headlights cutting the dark. I shouted for Mara to move, dragging her toward the door. The clerk followed, grabbing a flashlight. We burst outside, and the ranger, a grizzled woman named Dana, yelled for us to get in. The shadow didn't move, but I felt it stare, like it was memorizing us. We dove into Dana's truck, the engine roaring, and she floored it, tires spitting gravel. The hum faded, but my gut screamed we weren't free. Dana asked what happened, and I told her about Jasper, the tower, the figure. She didn't laugh, just nodded, like she'd heard whispers about Shenandoah Mountain before. The horror was still with us, and I knew it wasn't over. Dana drove toward Harrisonburg, the road empty, the forest looming. Mara was silent, her sketchpad clutched tight, guilt eating her up. I felt it too. Jasper was my idea on my trip. The hum was gone, but the air felt wrong, like we'd carried something out of the woods. I kept checking the rear view, expecting that figure to be in the road. It wasn't, but I felt its presence, like a weight on my chest. Dana said a search team would look for Jasper, but I knew it was pointless. Whatever took him wasn't leaving traces. The horror of losing him was sinking in, and I wasn't sure we'd ever escape what we'd woken at that tower. As we neared Harrisonburg, the stars broke through the clouds, but they didn't feel comforting. The shadow hadn't followed, but I knew it could. Mara whispered, "We shouldn't have taken those photos." I nodded, thinking of Virgil Kane's story, how he'd vanished after crossing the tower. The hum started again, faint, like a distant radio, saying pay. I gripped my keys, praying Dana's truck could outrun it. The ranger station was close, a faint hope, but I felt like we were still in that forest, still hunted. This thing wasn't done with us, and I was terrified it never would be. Dana's truck rattled into Harrisonburg, pulling into a ranger station under harsh floodlights. Mara sat beside me, her sketchpad open to that tower drawing, her hands shaking. The hum was gone, but its echo lived in my head, whispering UO. I kept replaying our mistake, Mara's photos, Jasper's poking around, my stupid plan to camp at Shenandoah Mountain. This wasn't just a scary story, it was a tragedy, and Jasper had paid the price. Dana parked, her face grim, like she knew more than she let on. The horror of what we'd faced clung to us, and I felt like we'd brought something with us, something that wasn't finished. Mara whispered, "I should have stopped him," her voice breaking. I wanted to argue, but guilt was choking me. Jasper had faced that thing, knife in hand, and I'd driven away. I remembered a night in Virginia Beach, lost in a storm, feeling helpless. This was worse. Jasper was gone, and we had no way to find him. Dana led us inside, where a cop took our statement. Jasper, the tower, the figure. He scribbled notes, but his eyes said he thought we were high. Mara tried to show her sketchpad, the tower drawing with that figure in the window, but the cop just frowned. I felt like we were in a horror movie, the survivors no one believes. Dana was different. She mentioned old stories about Shenandoah Mountain, how locals avoided the tower, saying it took those who got too close. Virgil Kane wasn't the only one, she said, her voice low. My stomach twisted. Was this thing older than one ghost? Had we stumbled into something ancient, tied to that spiral carving? The cops organized a search for Jasper, but I knew it was hopeless. The forest had swallowed him, like it had others. My SUV was towed back, keys still in my pocket, but I couldn't face it yet. Mara and I stayed in a motel, neither of us sleeping, every creak making us jump, expecting that hum to return. I looked up Virgil Kane later. His disappearance was real, 1974, after a fire he was blamed for starting. Locals said he'd angered the mountain, and his spirit guarded the tower, hating anyone who took its secrets. Mara's photos, Jasper's knife on that gate. Had we taken too much? The search found nothing. No Jasper, no knife, no trace. Mara went back to Lynchburg, but she stopped painting, her spark gone. I returned to Virginia Beach, but the ocean felt wrong, like I didn't belong. Every night, I hear that hum, faint but there, like it's waiting. I keep my keys on me, checking them obsessively, like they'll vanish again. Dana called a week later, saying they found spiral carvings near the tower, fresh ones, like someone, or something, had been there. She didn't say it, but I knew she thought we'd woken something up. The tragedy wasn't just losing Jasper, it was knowing we'd never be free of it. I avoid Route 33 now, but sometimes I drive by, and the forest feels alive, watching. Once, I saw a shadow in the trees, tall and thin, head tilted. It didn't move, but I felt it stare, angry and patient. I don't camp anymore. I don't trust the woods. Whatever we met at Shenandoah Mountain wasn't just a ghost. It was something older, something that demands payment. I keep Mara's sketchpad, the one she left behind. The tower drawing is there, the figure's blank face staring out. Sometimes, I swear it moves, just a little, like it's watching me. I tried to burn it once, but the hum started again, loud, saying my name. I stopped, too scared to try again. Jasper's gone, and I'm left with this weight, this horror that follows me. I tell myself it's over, but deep down, I know it's not. That thing is still out there, and I'm terrified it's waiting for me to pay what I owe. I pass by the forest sometimes, and the air feels heavy, like it's holding a grudge. I see that figure in my dreams, standing at the edge of my bed, head tilted. It doesn't speak, but I hear the hum, feel the debt. I'm not sure what we took from that tower, but it cost us Jasper, and it's not done with me. I lock my doors, keep the lights on, but it doesn't matter. The horror of Shenandoah Mountain is in me now, and I don't think it'll ever let me go. I wonder if Mara hears it too, wherever she is. I tried calling her once, but she didn't answer. Maybe she's running from it, like me. Or maybe she's already paid. The thought makes my blood run cold. I don't know what's worse, living with this fear or facing whatever's waiting. All I know is we made a mistake, and the forest doesn't forgive. I'm still here, but I'm not free. The hum is always there, faint but growing, like it's counting down. I don't know how much time I have left, but I feel it coming. That figure, that tower, that debt, it's not done. And neither am I.